You're in the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
So on last week's episode of the Paracast, we were talking about one of those UFO disclosure petitions, that coming, of course, from none other than Steve Bassett of the Paradigm Research Group, who's been a guest on the Paracast prior to Chris O'Brien's tenure, which we expect will be permanent as the co-host of the show. But that didn't fare too well. He got, 12,000 signees. Wow. And the White House had the third assistant flunky bureaucrat respond saying, now there are no spaceships, and goodbye. Nice effort. So he's trying again. What's the story, Chris?
Well, I think he's getting a little bit more creative this time, Gene. He's kind of drilling in and zeroing in on any information, I guess, that would be tied into what was called the Rockefeller Initiative, which is back in the mid-'90s. Lawrence Rockefeller made some behind-the-scenes inquiries, met with Hillary Clinton, and I think Bill Clinton as well, and tried to jumpstart a disclosure process, which never really went anywhere. He did fund a rather controversial effort, which started out as a briefing, basically, a briefing document written by Don Berliner and Antonio Huneeus, which was co-opted and kind of taken over by Stephen Greer, who then used it for his own purposes. This whole thing was funded by Lawrence Rockefeller, and we do know that Rockefeller did make some very extensive behind-the-scenes inquiries into disclosure and the extent of government knowledge of the UFO phenomenon. So I think it's a good idea for Bassett to kind of zero in on a particular aspect of the disclosure efforts that have happened in the past, and this would be a very good first step. I support this. I wish him all the luck because he's going to need it.
So clarify here. He wants them to tell us what they know about Lawrence Rockefeller's efforts?
Yes. In other words, there's a petition out there to fully disclose what happened as a result of the Rockefeller Initiative. Yeah.
So the question, of course, is they can either admit that it exists, but then they're not constrained to give us an honest appraisal of the results, or just say, well,
of course not.
People are inclined to reach theories, and this person attempted to explore something that we find no evidence for. Goodbye. Good luck.
I think Bassett's approach, by targeting his effort to a specific set of circumstances and a topic like the Rockefeller Initiative, I think it makes sense strategically and tactically in this effort. And I think he's just going to become more and more of a thorn in their side, and he's going to zero in on, I think the elements of the potential disclosure process that have the potential of bearing, the most fruit quickly. And I think this is very smart on his part to do this, and I do support it, and I wish him all the luck that he possibly could use because he's going to need it.
Well, the question is here, did he poison the pool with his first effort, with the 12,000 signatures? Because now he needs 25,000 in order to even be acknowledged, I guess, by the White House, right?
Right. Yeah, there is a ratcheting up process here. I think he should have probably done this one first and then waited, to do the big blanket sort of general petition. I think should have been done later. I think he would have had a much better chance of getting the required signatures for a broader appeal to the White House. But again, I mean, all this, as you probably suspect, and I feel, this is all just, I think it's just a lot of posturing. It's a lot of grandstanding. It's forcing the White House to make these very disingenuous statements that say, we don't know anything about any of this stuff. And basically they could just stonewall us, from now until 3 administrations down the road, and we're not going to get any closer. I think by drilling down on specific aspects of the historical record of a disclosure effort, I think he has more of a chance of possibly getting them to slip up and release something. But I'm not holding my breath.
Well, that's the question, slip up. And you think worrying about the state of the economy, worrying about Obama's chances for re-election in 2012, the least item on their list of concerns will be trying to answer questions about some UFO disclosure effort of some years back. Now, you knew Lawrence Rockefeller, didn't you?
I did. I had the distinct honor and pleasure of spending one-on-one with him an entire weekend with just him and I. And there's not too many people, I think, in the field that can actually say that. Generally, when you meet the man, it's within a group context, what have you. I just happened to luck out and be introduced to him, and I must have sparked some sort of interest in him because he spent the entire afternoon and evening with me and invited me back to spend the following day at a mutual friend's house. Actually, my neighbor, Hannah Strong, was the one that introduced me to him. When I arrived at Hannah's house, after she told me to drop everything I was doing and get my research together and get over there, I had no idea why she was saying this. Quite out of character for her. John Mack was leaving her house, and I thought I blew it. I had taken too much time because Mack was leaving, and I walked inside, and there's Lawrence just sitting there smiling. So I had a great time. I quizzed him up one side, down the other. He was extremely open, very magnanimous, seemed genuinely interested, motivated, excited by the paranormal and ufology and after-death studies, NDEs. We spoke for many hours on a whole variety of topics. Of course, the one that was closest and dearest to his heart was the whole crop circle phenomenon. And he did gift me with Michael Glickman's book, Corn Circles, which I cherish today. I think it's just a super classic, important work. It's very basic. It's very simple. It sort of lines up and delineates out the growing pattern of complexity within the crop circle phenomenon. In other words, how they became more and more complex, when the first additions to, the simple circle occurred in 1986, and then following that progression. I just value this book tremendously, and I think there's amazing clues in there. But the bottom line is Lawrence seemed as confused about the extent of government knowledge into the UFO subject as we are. Sure, he was an insider, kind of a billionaire guy who knows a lot of people, obviously. But I really did get a genuine feeling of wonder and questioning exactly to what extent the government does hold all these secrets, as people like Bassett and Greer have contended. And I think it's really important for the record to come out on Lawrence's involvement. Antonio Huneeus wrote a very good record in the Open Minds magazine last year about Rockefeller's involvement in ufology, which I do recommend people look up and read. But again, getting back to Bassett, I think this is a really smart move on his part, and I wish him all the luck.
Right. Now, we've had our differences with Stephen Bassett, I think maybe because he tends to overlook the crazies in the UFO field, and maybe some of his viewpoints are expressed a little too vigorously, a little bit too dogmatically. But we'll have to see what happens. I mean, if this brings about any realization that creates the climate for more serious research, it's got to be a plus.
Not if you're talking about the White House in an election year. I'm sorry, this is a third-rail toxic subject that will not be addressed.
Yeah, I agree with you there. But it would be nice if some response came. We're going to navigate from disclosure and petitions to UFOs in wartime. We've got a guy named Mack Maloney coming next. Tell us about this book.
I really like this book, Gene. I think it's a great companion to other books that have been written in the past about UFOs and in regards to the military. It's chock full of really interesting sighting reports going all the way back to Alexander's alleged encounters in 2 occasions, which I didn't know. We all have heard about the flying shields encounter, supposedly. But there was another encounter as well, which he shows in his book. He borrows heavily from other writers. Obviously, Jacques Vallée, who we've had on the show, wrote the wonderful book with Chris Aubeck called Wonders in the Sky. But he also leans on Strange Company, which is a very, very interesting book written by a guy named Keith Chester, which I do also recommend. It has quite a bit of material in there on Foo Fighters. I think that's the best book to read about the Foo Fighter phenomenon. So we're going to have some fun today. This book is really exciting. I learned a lot from it. Some of the cases that I kind of remembered reading about but forgotten about, they're all kind of tied together in a nice complete package here. And we're going to have some fun talking with Mack.
The book is UFOs in Wartime. The guest, Mack Maloney, coming up next on
the Paracast.
So here's what happened. I was placing an order online. The site went down. It just stopped responding. It took hours before it returned, but I'd already placed the order with another company. If your site goes down, you could lose business. And if you have a business or personal site, you'll want to know it's easy to run and it will stay online. At iWeb, your site is hosted on one of the most reliable networks in the world. Check it out. iWeb.com. That's iWeb.com. Fate magazine provides true reports of the strange and unknown. Keep up with the latest on angels and miracles, psychic phenomena, ghosts, UFOs, life after death, and much, much more. To receive your free issue of Fate magazine, call now at 1-800-728-2730 or visit their website at www.fatemag.com. That's 1-800-728-2730. What are you waiting for? Your fate awaits.
Nick Wadena with Midas Resources. If you have an IRA or 401k, did you know you can turn that nest egg into a physical gold and silver nest egg? Do you know what kind of specific precious metals are allowed by law to be in retirement accounts? Did you know that you can take physical delivery of these precious metals? Would you like to know more? It's a fact. Stocks and mutual funds have been a wild ride, and many people's retirement funds have taken large hits. If you put $100,000 in gold in January of 2009, it would be worth over $200,000 today. If you put $100,000 in silver, then it would be worth over $300,000 today. As bailouts for banks and the seemingly endless printing of money continues worldwide, the value of the dollar could decline further, in turn possibly pushing gold and silver much, much higher. Protect what you work so hard for. Call me, Nick Wadena, 1-800-686-2237, extension 343, and learn what your options are. Again, that's 1-800-686-2237, extension 343. Once again, 1-800-686-2237, extension 343.
From the shattered Rust Belt come the Lost Vegas.
Now also available in digital format at Amazon and iTunes worldwide.
Don't come calling when your walls start falling down. I've got a little bit of respect. Don't take it away. How does it feel to be one of the beautiful people? It ain't revolution. Time to drag it.
Life Before the Collapse by the Lost Vegas on 180-gram vinyl and mastered especially for vinyl by legendary audio engineer Steve Hall.
This guy, why don't want me to this guy?
Life Before the Collapse by the Lost Vegas. The Lost Vegas. Now available at Amazon.com
And iTunes.
Did you know that gold and silver contain healing properties? It's true. Since the beginning of mankind's history, gold and silver have not only been used as real money, but also for healing our minds and bodies. UtopiaSilver.com is your leading source for colloidal silver and colloidal gold, offering supplement protocols that can heal and enhance your health. Protocols for boosting the immune system, insomnia, yeast infections, herpes, and countering the effects of vaccinations and radiation poisoning. And now UtopiaSilver.com encourages the use of real money with this buy one, get one free real money special. For details on your colloidal silver and colloidal gold supplements, call 888-213-4338 and ask about 50% off for first-time customers. That's 888-213-4338 or visit UTOPIASilver.com. UtopiaSilver.com. Fighting for liberty and healing one American at a time.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And if you'd like to catch up on past episodes, we have hundreds of shows for you to download direct from theparacast.com. That's theparacast.com. Or check us out at iTunes.
The subject on the table on the Paracast with Gene and Chris is UFOs in wartime. Our guest is Mack Maloney, whom we welcome to the show. Mack, how did you get introduced to doing a book about UFOs?
Well, it all started about 3 years ago. I was at lunch with my editor at Penguin Books, and I've been writing for about 20 years full-time, but up till now all of the books that I've done have been fiction, military fiction, and a couple science fiction books.
You mean something like a Tom Clancy kind of approach?
It was right, exactly, in the Tom Clancy genre. Tom Clancy is like my godfather, if you know what I mean, my literary godfather. So
I understand. I do know Tom Clancy slightly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here right now. He really opened the door for a lot of people that write the kind of military fiction that I've been writing for years. So he's my hero.
You were writing military fiction and science fiction, and now you approach a factual book. So the question is, how did you transition?
We were really just kicking around ideas, and I had told my editor that, I'm always doing research on military weapons and military history and so on, but I've always had this interest in UFOs, and I'd read some articles about the Foo Fighters, and it just occurred to me that it seemed like a lot of UFO sightings took place during wartime. And it was just an idea that just came to me, and he and I spoke about it, and he says, really kind of look into that, see if there's something, if there's enough to do a book on it. And I did look into it, and it turned out that there was. So, as I said, that was about 3 years ago. Probably took about 2 years from beginning to end to research and then to write the book, and it's coming out on December 6th.
Now, that's a good point to mention here. This isn't something that you just threw together. You really did your research. You said you were interested in UFOs before then. Had you read the literature on the subject? Was it casual interest, something that started when you were a child? What?
Yeah, it started when I was a child. I was always a big fan of science fiction, and, in my mind, science fiction and UFOs were close cousins, let's say. I've never seen a UFO, but my older brother, who was a lifer in the Air Force, saw one while he was assigned to an air base down in Charleston, South Carolina. My wife saw one before we were married. I know people who have seen them. I've never seen one, but I've always had an interest in them, which I think a lot of people do. So I was just in a good position to be able to sit down and write a book about them.
Okay, so the conventional wisdom has it from some people that we didn't see UFOs until 1947 when Kenneth Arnold saw 9 disc-shaped or crescent-shaped objects over Mount Rainier in the state of Washington. But, of course, there were sightings in World War II, but that wasn't where they began. So what was your starting point?
They go way back, to the Bible and really throughout history. I mean, as you say, Arnold, he just coined the term in 1947, flying saucers.
Well, it was kind of coined by the press, but I'll
exactly.
go for that, sure.
Right, you're right. He said they looked like saucers skipping across a lake or something, and that turned into flying saucers. And that became like the catchphrase, and all of a sudden you had this media storm having to do with flying saucers. But as you say, they were seen, they just didn't have that name in World War II, in World War I, in between the wars, all the way back to there's a story in the book about Constantine the First, who was about to have a major battle for control of the Roman Empire, and he saw what people think was a UFO the night before the battle, and for some reason he interpreted that as being that if you tell your warriors to put crosses on their shields, you will win this battle. And that's what he did. He won the battle, and that's the reason Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. So in a way, you could say that because of a UFO, the Christian religion, flourished.
Let me interrupt quickly and mention to our audience that the particular sighting event, Mac, that you're referring to, which is a very intriguing, not well-known sighting event in history, was of like a glowing or flaming cross in the sky. And it was that image of the cross that was then suggested to be put on the shields, which then, dovetails into your story. But I think it's interesting that we should have an unusually shaped aerial object that then becomes the iconic symbol that we are all more than too familiar with.
Yeah, very interesting story from back then. That happened in 312 AD.
Right. Now, of course, you mentioned the Bible. You didn't look at Ezekiel's wheels as anything that you might want to include in this, or because it wasn't during, quote-unquote, wartime?
Well, it wasn't during wartime, and I think that people have seen that story enough. I really kind of tried to go for stories that, might not have been put out there as much, before. Some of the stories we came across were stories that no one's really heard before. So, right, we just kind of didn't go with the Ezekiel's wheel story.
I would like to have you go through the 2 events that Alexander, the famous Greek conqueror, and his armies experienced. There is one story that's fairly well known in ufology, but there's a second story that you include in your book that I find very fascinating. Why don't you give our listeners a a good sense of those two events.
Well, Alexander at the time was, on the verge of conquering the known world. He was this is the 3rd century BC. He was about to cross a river and ford a river with his army. His army included lots of men and horses and also war elephants. And he was about to go across this river when these two strange aircraft appeared in the sky and started spitting out flames from their rims and doing all this kind of stuff. And it panicked the horses and the war elephants to the point where they did not cross the river. So lots of people apparently witnessed this, and it I'm sure gave him pause. Then later on, there's a famous story about the siege of Tyre, which is in now present-day Lebanon. The people there who were resisting him built a city out in the harbor. He surrounded it, and he was trying to conquer the city of Tyre, which people had built out in this harbor. And he was constructing causeways to allow his troops to attack the city. As they were about to do that, when they finally did this massive construction project, these flying objects showed up again, and a couple of them fired on the walls of the city, knocking down the walls, and allowed Alexander to take over the city. A very strategic victory for him. Interesting story.
Wow, that's a detail that I wasn't aware of, that these objects actually aided in the bombardment of the city. That's a pretty interesting wrinkle.
Right.
So basically, the UFOs were, in that particular sense, participating in the wartime efforts back then.
Right. Once again, the first story, they seem to have been wanting to hold him back. The second story, they came to his aid. So, it's another puzzle of the big UFO puzzle.
And maybe they don't have a prime directive there when it comes to interfering with human history. That could raise all sorts of cans of worms, and we're going to want to ask you.
Oh, boy.
Where that takes us. Oh, yeah. Well, the book is called UFOs in Wartime. The author is Mack Maloney. A reminder, neighbors, that we have a unique way for you to participate in the show, to ask questions of our guests. When we can schedule them far enough in advance, we will post a forum topic or thread in the question bank. That's located in the Paracast community forums. Go to forum.theparacast.com. Once again, that's forum.theparacast.com. It takes just a moment to join up, and after you join up, then you can participate. And when we can give you time to ask those questions, we'll post the topic in the Paracast community forums. I'm Gene Steinberg. He's Chris O'Brien. You're in
the Paracast.
America's #1 source for independent talk radio for over a decade. We are the GCN Radio Network.
Hey folks, in today's fast-paced work environment, getting everyone in the same room for a meeting can be challenging, especially when they work in different locations. And that's why I use GoToMeeting with HD Faces by Citrix. It is amazing. You can collaborate online by sharing your presentation. While seeing colleagues face-to-face in high definition, they can hide their blemishes. Video quality is so clear and natural, it's like being in the same room. And all you need is an internet connection with a webcam. It's that easy. So here's what I can do. For example, on the Paracast, which I host with my friend Chris O'Brien, we live in different locations. We need to share something, a document or something like that. All I have to do is call him up with GoToMeeting, and I say, Chris, take a look at this, and he said he's ready to go. You can try GoToMeeting with HD Faces, free for 30 days. Visit GoToMeeting.com, click the Try It Free button, enter the promo code PODCAST, use the promo code PODCAST.
Local Army-Navy surplus stores are hard to find these days, but not military-issue supplies. They're right here online at mainmilitary.com. That's right, just like the state, M-A-I-N-E, military.com. We have everything for true total preparedness. Mainmilitary.com is not a typical website. It has much more than your old surplus store. Quality military-issue survival gear like canteens, mess kits, utensils, gas masks, filters, and chemical suits. Magnesium fire-starting tools, strike anywhere, waterproof, and storm matches. First aid kits, splints, tourniquets, parachute 550 cord, military manuals, sandbags by the bale, and a huge Molly assortment of vests and pouches for every need. Call 207-989-6783, 207-989-6783, or visit mainmilitary.com. That's M-A-I-N-E military.com, the main name in military supply.
Survival of the fittest. In any and all situations, survival is your number one priority. That requires being tough and thinking smart. And the folks at Freeze Dry Guy are going to help you do just that. They have the long-range patrol ration entrees, what they call the Brick Pack. When you're in survival mode, it is absolutely the best item for your survival pack or bug-out bag. You can go farther, faster, and carry more food with the LRP cold weather ration entrees. Not only do these long-lasting, durable entrees help sustain you or your family through the harshest environment or situation, they are by far the most delicious of their kind. No contest. With a variety of tasty entrees, you can't beat the LRP Brick Packs. Let Freeze Dry Guy help you in your survival situations. Go to freezedryguy.com. That's freezedryguy.com or call 866-404-3663. That's 866-404-FOOD.
Discover a natural way to experience cleaner, healthier indoor air without expensive filters and high-priced machines. Discover what healthcare professionals have known for decades. Salt ionizes and purifies indoor air. That's why you need to visit SilverSkyImports.com. SilverSkyImports.com offers a wide assortment of Himalayan crystal salt lamps, handcrafted from salt crystals that are millions of years old, contain healthy ions that eliminate odor, reduce bacteria, and can even help allergy and asthma sufferers, which means you and your family will breathe better, sleep sounder, and have more energy. These salt lamps are available in stunning, natural colors and shapes to accent any home or office, are environmentally friendly, and best of all, they're affordable. And don't forget, SilverSkyImports.com also carries gourmet and bath salts. Order today at SilverSkyImports.com or call 800-494-1369. That's 800-494-1369. Breathe easier, feel better, live healthier at SilverSkyImports.com.
Hi, this is Don Ecker, and you are tuned into the Paracast. Let me tell you what, you're going to hear stuff here that you probably won't hear anywhere else. Hear that, George Snorri?
The topic on discussion is UFOs in wartime, going back hundreds or thousands of years with Mack Maloney, with Gene and Chris on the Paracast. So we were exploring Alexander's efforts in wartime and the apparent efforts by whatever was piloting the UFOs to influence our war. As I said, maybe the aliens or whatever they are don't have a prime directive. Do you have any evidence in your book of other cases involving not just something in the sky, but something that seems to be a participant?
Interesting question. And the answer is, other than, no, not a direct participant, but we have lots of stories in the book about people, someone observing the human race at war. I mean, the bulk of the stories in the book seem to point out that there is, whenever we go to war, whether it's back in, BC or right up into the present, there are a large number of UFO sightings of things just watching us, looking at us, observing us, watching us kill each other.
Well, Mac, you do have one really interesting story from the Vietnam War that features, I think, an 8-foot helmeted giant.
Right.
That seemed to be somewhat alien in appearance that happened to kill a threatening Viet Cong, I think, or some sort of North Vietnamese soldier, so that a GI could clamber aboard a U.S. helicopter and be rescued. That, I know I'm jumping ahead in our timeline a little bit here, but there are those rare accounts where you do seem to have some sort of interference on one side or another.
Right, that is one of the exceptions, and basically what that story was the Vietnam War was the way they fought the Vietnam War. I'm sure everyone knows now there were no front lines. It was a helicopter war. The Army would send in dozens, even hundreds of helicopters full of troops. They would land in the middle of enemy territory, fight the enemy, and try to kill more of them than they killed of us. Not really a good way to run a war, but that's another subject. On this one day, it was in 1966, this gentleman was part of one of these airborne assaults. They landed in a field and immediately got into a firefight with the Viet Cong. And there was so much ordnance going back and forth that it lit the dry grass of the field on fire. He got out of his helicopter, and his crew chief, or his sergeant, told him, that the helicopter in back of them was having mechanical problems. In fact, their engine was on fire. So he ordered this gentleman to take a fire extinguisher and go back and help put out the fire in the helicopter. He did this, but he left his rifle behind on his helicopter and ran to help the second helicopter. By the time he got there, the people in the helicopter had already solved the problem, and they started waving him back. Well, at this point, he's in the middle of a battle, and he's in the middle of a large grass fire, and he gets disoriented. And he finds himself face-to-face with a Viet Cong soldier or a North Vietnamese soldier, and he's about to be shot. And what happened next was he saw a giant. That's the only way to describe this person. He was about 8 feet tall. He was wearing some kind of a uniform, including a helmet that covered most of his face. This being killed the North Vietnamese soldier, saved the American soldier's life. The American soldier finally found his helicopter, ran back to it, took off, and when they took off, he saw the dead enemy soldier, but there was no sign of the giant that had saved his life. Very, very unusual story.
Where did you get the documentation on this? I mean, this is really good stuff. And I'm wondering about the evidence train on this.
Well, what I did was a lot of these were found on the net. And if my editor said, if you can find two sources for a story, let's go with it. The idea here is that I'm not exactly a UFO researcher. I'm more of a reporter. And I just wanted to lay out, a whole different string of stories to kind of make the point that UFOs do show up. It seems like they show up more frequently when we are at war. And the Vietnam War itself was kind of a crazy war. I mean, let's face it, there was a lot of drug use during it. It was a war that, as I said, had no front lines, no real victory in sight. You did your 365 days in country, and you just prayed that you could get out, and you made it through however you could make it through. So the stories from the Vietnam War, I'll be honest with you, are a little offbeat.
Now, did you ever encounter what has now become, among serious UFO researchers, quite a famous story that was first, I think, touted by a researcher named Bill English back in the late 80s about a B-52 crew that were found mutilated but sitting in their seats with their seatbelts on in a crashed plane that seemed to have been set down into the jungle. There was no pattern of broken trees like the plane had glided in. It was more like it was literally sat right down into the jungle. And, of course, the fantastic claim by English that I think it was 7 crew members were found, like the cattle mutilation cases, mutilated but still sitting in their seats aboard this B-52. Did you ever encounter that particular story?
No, I didn't. I'm hearing it for the first time. I'm sitting here with my jaw agape. I had never.
Yeah,
heard that
believe it or not, this was a story that was touted for some time, and I've heard other people refer to it. I think it all goes back to the original Bill English account. But I was just curious because this is one of those too strange possibly to be true type stories that comes from a fairly reputable source. I think the story's been pretty much discounted since then, but again, this is another Vietnam era story. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves, though. Let's go back to our timeline. I love the way you have your book. It's kind of similar to Jacques Vallée and Chris Aubeck's book, Wonders in the Sky, where they just start, from the historical record and then just work our way forward. And you have a lot of interesting stories, but there seems to be kind of a bit of a hole in your research during the Middle Ages. There are a few accounts that you give in there, and I'd like you to tell our audience about some of the more celebrated accounts. There's a couple of really good ones in there.
The one that really kind of was of interest to me was that, and I didn't know this before, was that when the plague hit Europe, Western Europe in the 1300s, that a lot of people, and it's become accepted now that it was caused by bacteria carried by fleas, and the fleas were carried by rats. But there were a lot of people back then who apparently saw things like flying objects flying around, leaving vapor in its wake, people becoming sick from this vapor, and that maybe this was an alternate cause or another explanation for the plague. But the odd thing was that along with these stories about this strange vapor, people reported seeing figures dressed in black hoods and robes and using with sickles and unexplainably killing livestock, and they were almost like medieval men in black, and today we know them as the Grim Reapers. So there was a lot of strange things going on back then, and I had never heard that before. That was just something I came upon in my research. And one thing I wanted to say was these stories, we did pick and choose the stories we were going to use for medieval times because the core of the book we wanted to start at the beginning of the 20th century. And we just wanted to kind of give everyone a taste of some things that had happened before that. But the book really kicks off in 1909 with the scare ships.
I like that term, scare ships. We just had Jeff Danilek on the show, and we talked about the great airships, which were 10 years prior to that. But why don't you give us some examples of the scare ship sightings?
Well, the scare ships is that the chapter on the scare ships. It's one of my favorites because I had known a little bit about it, but when I kind of started researching it, it just seemed to get stranger and stranger. What happened was in 1909, in spring of that year, a policeman in Peterborough, England, heard a strange sound. It was about 4 a.m. He was walking a beat, I guess you could say, and he looked up and he saw this object go over him. It was huge.
Neighbors, we want you to check out our newly updated forums. Go to forum.theparacast.com. That's forum.theparacast.com. A new, snazzier look, better integration with your favorite social networks. Check it out. We have to break this up and speak to you about it on the other side of the show here. With Gene and Chris, you're in
The Paracast.
Are you tired of searching for great talk radio?
Something more important.
Search no more. We are the GCN Radio Network.
Are you ready to order the official Paracast t-shirt? You asked, we answered. We're now taking orders for the official Paracast t-shirt. It comes in white, 100% cotton. The front of it features the same logo that we have on our community forums. On the back it says, separating signal from noise. To order the official Paracast t-shirt, here's all you have to do. Visit our new online store at store.theparacast.com. One more time, that's store.theparacast.com. You can use a major credit card to place your order for the official Paracast t-shirt. Hey neighbors, we have one more thing to talk about, and that's more merchandise at the official Paracast store. We have hats, we have jackets, we even have a flip video camcorder customized with the Paracast logo at the official Paracast store. It's all now available at the official Paracast store, store.theparacast.com.
We all know that Berkey Water Purification Systems are the most trusted name in water filtration. As an authorized Berkey dealer for over 6 years and serving thousands of satisfied customers, the Berkey Guy offers amazing specials for Berkey Water Filtration Systems. The Berkey Light Systems include a set of self-sterilizing and recleanable black purification elements that purify water by removing chlorine, pathogenic bacteria, cysts, and parasites to non-detectable levels and remove harmful chemicals such as herbicides and pesticides. Order the Berkey Light System today, complete with 2 black Berkey elements for only $231, and the Berkey Guy will ship your order free of charge. With the purchase of a Berkey Light, the Berkey Guy is also offering a set of fluoride and arsenic filters for only $39.99. That's over 30% off the retail price. Call the Berkey Guy at 1-877-886-3653. That's 1-877-886-3653. Or order online at goberkey.com. That's goberkey.com today.
Ready for cold and flu season? Now's the time to get ready and save during the pre-winter sale at herbalhealer.com. Stock up on powerful, natural flu fighters like olive leaf extract, elderberry power, and grapefruit seed liquid. Don't forget your vitamin D3 this winter. Right now, herbalhealer.com has 120 soft gels, 1,000 IUs on sale for only $9. And remember, herbalhealer.com offers eFoods Global products. Delicious, premium, storable foods that contain no MSG no trans fats, no GMO, and have a 25-year shelf life. Click the eFoods link on herbalhealer.com and try eFoods storable meals for free. Bookmark herbalhealer.com, then experience live chat, correspondence courses, and sign up for our free newsletter. As always, new customers get a free 128-page catalog with your order. Log on and hit the pre-winter specials at herbalhealer.com. Healing the world with nature, one person at a time, since 1988.
Solar power. Solar power. Hand crank power. Hand crank power. Radio power. Radio power. The goods you want, the good deals you need to power up your survival are at 21stcenturygoods.com. In our solar department, you'll find solar generator kits, solar lanterns, flashlights, radios, and solar cell phone and laptop chargers. 21stcenturygoods.com is your hand crank headquarters for everything from generators to flashlights to emergency, weather, and shortwave radios by Grundig and Cato. Big brand names and big deals. Like this. Get a free solar flashlight with every order over $75. But hurry, offer ends soon. Go to 21stcenturygoods.com. Spelled the number 2, the number 1, ST, centurygoods.com. That's 21stcenturygoods.com or call 866-999-8422. 21stcenturygoods.com. Power up your survival.
This is Paul Bannister. I'm the author of Tabloid Man, The Baffling Chair of Death. You're in the Paracast. And now I'm on the show because the Queen herself asked me to do it. She knows, well, she told me the Paracast is the gold standard of paranormal broadcasting. Listen and be spooked.
Gene and Chris in the Paracast, we have Mack Maloney. The book is called UFOs in Wartime, and we're taking it through the years, incredible cases. So the UFO, Mack, passed overhead. What happened next?
So he saw this object pass over his head. It was about 300 feet long. It was moving very swiftly. It was about 1,000 feet above him, and it was in the shape of a Zeppelin. Germans, and at the time, only the Germans, of course, invented the Zeppelins, and they had civilian Zeppelins, but they didn't have military Zeppelins at the time. This policeman saw this object. He reported it. It made the newspaper. Nothing happened right away, but about a month and a half later, all of a sudden, people all over England start seeing these objects. And they look like Zeppelins, but they're not Zeppelins for several reasons. First of all, they were clocked at going over 200 miles an hour. Even today, the best blimps we have can't make it over 60 miles an hour. They were seen flying against the wind. They were seen simultaneously all over England, indicating that there were more than just one. They were seen with large searchlights glowing from beneath them and shining on the ground. Suddenly, hundreds of people are seeing these things, and people go, what could these things possibly be? There was a newspaper that clocked one. They had a reporter in one town who saw it, and he started a clock, and then one of his associates in another town saw it show up 20 minutes later, and that's how they figured out they were going more than 200 miles an hour. Yet it was impossible at that time for a German Zeppelin to make the 700-mile round trip it would take to go from Germany to England and back at night. So they weren't Zeppelins. No one ever figured out what they were.
You know, it's interesting when you say this, Mack, how in our previous week's episode, I brought up the fact that UFO sightings over the years, and certainly maybe not so much in Renaissance times or before that, but more recent times, they seem to have a technology that's only a few steps ahead of ours.
Right. Exactly.
Which is very curious.
This is what we found out, in the research. It seems like, and who knows what the explanation could be, but it seems like in the case of the scare ships, and then in the case of the ghost flyers of Sweden in 1933-34, and then again the ghost rockets in Sweden in 1946, it seems in those cases we are seeing a technology that is just slightly ahead of its time. Not slightly, but ahead of its time for some reason. And what the explanation for that is, I don't know, but there's definitely, in those three instances, a good case to be made for it, whatever that case might be.
Precursor element, I think, is really important. Of course, Jacques Vallée and others have really made a note of it and attempted to really analyze the implications of this. But going back to your previous accounts of Alexander, Constantine, other events that occurred much further back in time, not only do we have interference or taking of sides by these objects and the supposed pilots, but we have technology that is way ahead of the time, which doesn't conform to this particular more modern aspect where UFOs tend to be couched just slightly ahead of their time. I think that's an interesting subject for someone out there to tackle and really analyze, but continue.
Well, with the another side story to the scare ships was, as this scare ship mania was going on in 1909, and World War I was just 5 years away, and it had been proven just about, that it was impossible for these things to be Zeppelins, yet they look like Zeppelins. There was an instance where a gentleman saw one of the scare ships over his house at the height of the craze, let's say, and at night, and he happened to live in a part of England that he was on a cliff. And the next day he went out and he found this strange object, which was, he described it as a long metal bar with a soccer ball-shaped thing stuck onto it. He had no idea what it was. He got a hold of the local Coast Guard. They came up and they looked at the object, and the local police looked at it, had no idea what it was. They told him to please hang on to it until someone from the British military could look at it. So this is what he did, and he hid it in his barn, as it turned out. Several days later, the British military came and they took it, and they said it was some kind of a targeting device used by ships at sea. What it was doing on top of this cliff, no one ever figured out, but right around the same time, one of this gentleman's servants, house servants, was leaving the house, and she saw these two men, strange men, on the cliff, and they were kind of looking in the same area where he had found this object, and then they were looking in his barn, and she described them as men wearing black. And and then as soon as she confronted them, they left, she left, and they kind of scared her away. From that point on, there were other people who would say that they would run into these mysterious characters dressed in black who would show up at the sites of where scare ships had been seen shortly before. So in an odd way, it was almost like the first Men in Black incident happening during the scare ship craze of 1909.
Very interesting. We also had a flurry of sightings in New Zealand that same year of similar described objects. Where did this term scare ships come up with? I love that. I think that's very interesting. I hadn't heard that before.
Well, it was. I think it was created by the media back then. The British media is there's always been, and it's the same today. There's always been lots and lots of newspapers in England, and they were even tabloids back then. And I think it was just a word created by someone in the British media, and it stuck.
I wanted to ask you here in terms of sourcing. You said the publisher insisted you have two sources for every story. Now, obviously, in something like this, you're going online, you're checking newspaper morgues, stuff like that. Did you have a chance to talk to anybody about recent cases?
No, I didn't. I had conversations with Richard Haynes and Jerry Clark and Keith Chester, who wrote the book on Foo Fighters called Strange Company. That was just more for background and guidance, though I went to their books a lot for research. And the book actually ends at the end of the first Gulf War. It just seemed to be the place to end it. And, whether we'll continue on someday from that, I don't know. But I did talk to those guys a lot, but it was more for like background research and really guidance on how to do a book like this, because they were experts at it, and I was, admittedly kind of new to the field.
Did you find cases that you thought had promise, but on further discovery they were found to be wanting, maybe bogus?
I probably did. I can't remember, any specific cases right now. It really was a case of going through as much literature as I could put my hands on, and still staying with the kind of chronological way that the book is laid out. So I'm going to say no. Almost everything that we really concentrated on wound up in the book, to tell you the truth.
So when you decided to focus on a case, you did this with the help of these experienced researchers, and certainly Jerry Clark is a longtime friend of mine and a friend of the show. They were pointing you in the direction of the cases that had the most significance and the ones worth following up on.
Yes, right, exactly, and especially the ones that were in the books that they had written, and I also talked to those guys because, like I say, as I said before, I'm kind of new to the game, and I didn't want to say anything that was wrong, if you know what I mean, wrong in quotes. just wanted to create a book that, would be entertaining and at the same time would point out that, this is really strange that UFOs show up a lot while we're at war with each other. And here are I think there's 70 different episodes in it. And just read them from beginning to end and then draw your own conclusions. My conclusion is that there's something very unusual going on here. What it is, I would love to know. I don't know, but here's the evidence that something very strange is going on here.
So you're not making an effort here to say, okay, this proves that E.T. is here. It is. No. This is stuff that is really weird, and we ought to find out what's going on.
Exactly. That's, you put it exactly. That's exactly how we set out to do the book. I don't know what they are. I would love to know what they are. I think we'd all love to know exactly what they are. Are they extraterrestrial? We don't know. Are they time travelers? Are they from another dimension? Are they from inner space? Are they from someplace that we can't conceive of? I don't know. But if you read all the stories in the book, I think you have to come to the conclusion that something is there, something is happening, and maybe someday soon. I asked Jerry Clark this. I asked everyone this at the end of the book. I put the question to them, when do you think the UFO puzzle is going to be solved? And Jerry gave what I thought was the best answer and also the most optimistic answer. He said within the next 50 years, the scientific community will finally take UFOs. Maybe you've heard this before. UFOs seriously, and they'll start researching this and try to look for the answer. And he was, I hope he's off on his timeline. I would like it to happen, sooner than that.
Well, I guess if you are under 30 or 40, that makes sense. You'll live to see it. Right. If not, you hope that we expand the life cycle of human beings to accommodate that. Now they have a record number of people over 90. There might be hope. Right. We have Mack Maloney. That's because Chris is 400 years old, didn't want to tell you. He has those nighttime sojourns with the red substance. Mack Maloney is author of UFOs in Wartime. With Gene and Chris, you're in
the Paracast. The GCN Radio Network, providing the world with hard-hitting talk radio. GCN. Great talk radio starts here.
Hi, this is Ted Anderson. If you own an Apple iPhone and love to listen to your favorite programs on GCN, I've got good news for you. I'm proud to announce that GCN has a brand new iPhone app available for our dedicated listeners at GCNlive.com. Listen to your favorite hard-hitting GCN programs live or on demand right on your iPhone. And the best part? The GCN iPhone app can be yours absolutely free. Download the iPhone app today by clicking on the banner at GCNlive.com. Again, that's GCNlive.com. We the people grow cotton, weave fabric, engrave ink, embed strips and fibers to protect from counterfeit and carting to a private bank, having it lent back at interest, forcing taxes to service debt. This capitalism, or was Jefferson correct when stating a central bank issuing the public currency is a greater menace to the liberties of the people than a standing army? Ted Anderson, I'm placing a free silver dollar in a book that explains our monetary system. Call for your copy, 800-686-2237. It's time to understand the system. Call 800-686-2237. That's 800-686-2237.
Welcome back to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
We begin another hour of exploring UFOs in wartime with Mack Maloney, someone new to the UFO field but not new to doing research, especially into military matters. With Gene and Chris, you're in the Paracast. Let me ask you just a parenthetical question here. There have also been a number of reports of UFOs over nuclear installations. Did you get a chance to look into those too?
Yes. As soon as nuclear power became a reality, UFOs started showing up over nuclear power, first processing plants and then ICBM facilities. Once again, it really kind of gives you this idea that something is looking in on us, watching us, knowing our every move, and they're very, very interested in things that have to do with maybe our own self-destruction. I think it's pretty well known that in the 60s and the 70s, as soon as the U.S. Air Force opened up ICBM bases in the middle part of the United States, UFOs started showing up over these bases. There have been entire books written about this subject.
Did
Once
you
again,
happen to get in touch with Robert Hastings?
I talked to him through just email. He and I emailed each other back and forth when I bought his book, but I never talked to him. Someday I really want to talk to him because, obviously he's the guy, he's the expert on this.
We can make that happen.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would love to talk to him.
He's a friend of the show, participates in our forums. Robert Hastings. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, the book that he did is UFOs and Nukes. And I would also suggest, Mac, that you may want to check the archives of the Paracast because we've had Robert on 2 or 3 times to talk about the subject.
And he's building a house in the San Luis Valley as we speak.
Well, he's the guy. He's the man
he
who knows
is.
all about this stuff, and he's done a tremendous amount of research.
Well, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here because a real sizable chunk of your book is on the Foo Fighter phenomenon, which, of course, Keith Chester did a great job in Strange Company, detailing out just amazing. I had no idea that there were so many sightings of these very enigmatic objects. But I want to go back to that time period, that really interesting time period between the 2 world wars. And one case that you bring out that what totally blew me away, I had no idea that this case existed, involves the Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen, who, of course, was the greatest ace of World War I, shot down 80 Allied planes. But according to this particular account from the World News Daily that you cite in your book, he actually shot down a UFO in 1917, which was news to me. Why don't you give us a little insight on that particular incident? Because this is a really rare case.
Right. Well, as you say, the Red Baron, he was the #1 fighter ace of the German Air Force in World War I. He's mostly famous for the Red Baron's Flying Circus, but this happened about a year before the Flying Circus was formed. Spring of 1917, he was on combat patrol. His wingman's name was Peter Warzik, and they were flying over Belgium, I believe it was, looking for Allied airplanes. And they came upon, it was a clear day, bright blue sky, and they came upon this silvery disc-like object. They had no idea what it was. It was about 100 feet in diameter, very bright in the sky. And Warzik's story was that they, it scared the heck out of them at first. The U.S. had just entered the war. The only thing they could think of was this was some kind of a new, U.S. airplane, a reconnaissance aircraft. They didn't know. So von Richthofen just opened up on it, fired on it, shot it down. They saw it crash into the woods. They saw 2 occupants run from it. They returned to base, and they were told not to mention it again. And Warzik didn't mention it until the late 40s, when all of a sudden all these stories that we were talking about previously about flying saucers started coming out in the media, and he realized that's what we saw way back when. So he never really told anyone about it except people in his family, and then he did do this interview. I think it was shortly before he died. He went on to fight in World War II and became an airline pilot, but he just didn't tell very many people this story until he gave this interview. So it was a good way to kind of start off the modern part of the book.
I wonder if that was one of the Red Baron's 80 kills.
I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah,
That's a good
79 Allied planes and 1 UFO.
Right.
I just think about that hit record from the 60s. Snoopy versus the Red Baron. Remember that?
Right. Oh, yeah, of course. I could even sing it to you, Gene, but I won't.
I'm hoping you don't. I'm really praying that you don't.
Okay, I won't.
All right. Let's continue with the Foo Fighters.
How about the ghost ships? We've got a whole wave of activity that occurred in the 30s in Sweden.
Right,
the ghost planes up there. Right. I mean, to me, that's really important. Let's hit a couple of those examples before we move into World War II.
Very good. Let's predate World War II. And this is good, too, to mention because so many people think either 1947 or World War II signaled the beginning of the UFO mystery, and now we're focusing a lot on the fact that this is not quite what happened.
That's right. In 1933, late in 1933, the people who lived in this very isolated region of Sweden called Västerbotten heard something flying over one night. And it was a very noisy airplane. It was going through, there's a lot of river valleys, steep mountains in this area, and it was winging its way through these river valleys, waking everybody up in this really kind of sparsely populated part of Sweden. No one knows what it was. The authorities were contacted. They looked into it. They didn't know. They checked it and found out there was no Swedish military planes flying that night. There were no custom planes flying that night. Those are the only two, let's say, suspects who might have been causing all this racket. Now, back in 1933, airplanes were still kind of in their infancy. Most airplanes were made of fabric. They weren't made of steel. Most of them were inefficient, and most of them couldn't fly for very long, without some kind of maintenance or refueling. And especially in this part of the world, seeing an airplane was a rare event. So this night it happened, and then the next night it happened, and then the next night it happened. And suddenly more people are seeing this aircraft, and what they described it as is a large aircraft with 8 engines on it. All right. Now, I don't think there's any planes. I couldn't find any airplanes that had 8 engines on them, especially none back in 1933. But not only did they have 8 engines on them, but they had very unusual twin boom tails, almost like a P-38 fighter, and they had pontoons on them. And this part of Sweden, there is no water unless it's frozen. It's basically snow and tundra. So people all over this part of Sweden start seeing these things, and they're seeing them all over the country, like the scare ships, indicating that there was more than one of them. The Swedish military sent out planes to look for them, never found them. 6 Swedish military planes crashed during the search. It lasted a couple months. Suddenly people start seeing them over Norway and Finland. No markings on the airplanes, no country insignia. No airplane existed that fit the description of these airplanes. Now, these airplanes used to do something very unusual. One thing unusual about them was that they also had searchlights hanging down the bottom, out of their fuselage, shining on the ground below, just like the scare ships. And what they used to do is they would circle a town or railroad stations or mountains. And people would see them doing this. They were just constantly circling, shining their lights down on either the railway station or the town or the mountain. And they would do this for hours. And the strange thing about it is, back then you couldn't fly an airplane for hours. You could only fly an airplane for a couple hours at most, and where it had to land and get refueled. Yet these things would be flying all night. They flew in all kinds of weather. They flew in blizzards. And another unusual thing is that they would, when people would see them circling their towns, they would shut their engines off and glide, and then start their engines again. And I can tell you, I know a little bit about aviation. That's virtually impossible to do. Yet people saw them doing it. And this lasted for about 4 or 5 months, and then just as suddenly as they appeared, they disappeared. People theorized that maybe they were German weapons. The Nazis had just come into power in Germany. Germany's not that far away from Sweden, but and the theory was that the Germans had a top-secret aircraft carrier up in the Arctic Sea somewhere, launching this aircraft. Well, that is not true because, number one, the Germans never had a working aircraft carrier. Number two, if they had some kind of battle cruiser that they could launch these airplanes from, they'd have to be launching dozens of airplanes every night, night after night, retrieving them in the worst kind of weather. It would be very hard to do that with an aircraft carrier these days.
I'll tell you what, we have Mack Maloney. We're looking at UFOs in wartime with Gene and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
So here's what happened. I was placing an order online. The site went down. It just stopped responding. It took hours before it returned, but I'd already placed the order with another company. If your site goes down, you could lose business. And if you have a business or personal site, you'll want to know it's easy to run and it will stay online. At iWeb, your site is hosted on one of the most reliable networks in the world. Check it out. iWeb.com. That's iWeb.com. Fate magazine provides true reports of the strange and unknown. Keep up with the latest on angels and miracles, psychic phenomena, ghosts, UFOs, life after death, and much, much more. To receive your free issue of Fate magazine, call now at 1-800-728-2730 or visit their website at www.fatemag.com. That's 1-800-728-2730. What are you waiting for? Your fate awaits.
Again, the Congressional Budget Office sounds the alarm. This time warns of Greek-style U.S. debt crises. You heard me right. The GAO is drawing a parallel between the U.S. economy, its debt, and the current Greek economic meltdown. With the debt-to-GDP chart climbing into unfamiliar territory, the growing budget deficit will rise to unsupportable levels. Hi, this is Ted Anderson. The Federal Debt and Risk of Financial Crises document the CBO has published is a must-read for every American, covering the risk of continued deficit spending coupled with an aging population and the rising interest rates spell economic disaster. It's imperative that you get a copy of this document and study it for yourself. Call me today at 800-686-2237 and I'll send you a free copy. Again, call 800-686-2237 and ask for your copy of the CBO document. Once again, you need to read this government report. Call 800-686-2237.
Attention GCN listeners, do you have a Patriot on your Christmas list that's nearly impossible to shop for? How would you like the ability to get top-of-the-line, hard-to-find gifts at equally hard-to-beat prices without leaving the comfort of your home? Why fight the crowd? Simply log on to your computer for great gifts and deals for the off-the-grid enthusiast in your family. At offthegridchristmas.com, you'll find great prices on the most popular off-the-grid gifts available today. At offthegridchristmas.com, you'll find unbeatable deals on emergency backup power, herb and vegetable seeds, dehydrated foods, emergency evacuation packs, solar ovens, gun safes, and a host of truly unique stocking stuffers. In these hard times, why not give a gift that really counts? A gift that could truly make a difference. Go to offthegridchristmas.com and our Christmas video highlighting perfect gifts for the off-the-grid fans in your family. Unbeatable gear, unbeatable prices, no more searching. Offthegridchristmas.com. That's offthegridchristmas.com.
As we age, we lose both strength and muscle mass. Undamaged whey protein from grass-fed cows is nature's most powerful food to gain back lost muscle. Virtually all whey protein powders or drinks have been damaged during processing or are high in sugar. This damaged whey causes a significant loss in the ability of the body to build new muscle proteins. The high sugar content will stop all the benefits of your growth hormone from causing muscle repair. By giving your body easily absorbed, undamaged whey, free of added sugar, you may be able to gain back lost muscle and strength. One World Whey is truly undamaged whey protein powder free of added sugar. Both young and elderly are reporting increases in muscle strength and size without any additional exercise. Go to oneworldwhey.com, that's oneworldwhey.com, to read or hear some impressive testimonies to this effect. Or call 888-988-3325, that's 888-988-3325.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And if you'd like to catch up on past episodes, we have hundreds of shows for you to download, direct from theparacast.com. That's theparacast.com. Or check us out at iTunes.
We have Mack Maloney. The subject is UFOs in wartime. And we're just hearing all sorts of cases. Lay another one on us.
Okay, well, we can go into the Foo Fighters now. The Foo Fighters were what people called UFOs during World War II.
Okay, now, did you look up the derivation of that term? How did it start to be called Foo Fighters?
It was funny because towards the end of the war, I mean, they were known by many names during the war by the Allied intelligence people. They used to call them just unidentified objects. They called them misguided rockets, believe it or not. Most people thought, on the Allied side, thought that they were German wonder weapons. And that's kind of like the punchline of the whole Foo Fighter phenomenon. But there was one particular squadron, the 415th Night Fighter Squadron, that ran into more Foo Fighters than any other squadron, Allied squadron in the war. And it was the pilots in that squadron that named it after, there was a comic strip back then called, where there was a character called Foo Fighter in it. Or he was a firefighter, and his fire truck was called the Foo Fighter, and that name just kind of stuck. That's how they got the name Foo Fighters. But Foo Fighters was actually a term that came towards the end of the war.
Let's look at a few cases here.
Well, it really all started in early in the war, before the American 8th Air Force even got over to England to join in the bombing of Nazi Germany. British bombers were reporting seeing these strange objects that would tail behind them during bombing runs. Sometimes actually come up and fly parallel to them. Sometimes come up and fly in front of them, almost like flying in formation. Now, a lot of these were described as glowing orbs, but others were described as just these huge, fantastic-looking aerial objects that were with portholes and lights seen behind the portholes. The British crews would come home. They would be debriefed. As soon as you land, the first thing you do after a bombing mission is you debrief by your intelligence people. They would start reporting these things. Now, the intelligence people didn't really know what to make of it. So basically, the excuse everyone came up with is these must be German weapons. We will put them in the report, but our number one priority here is winning the war, bombing Germany into submission, and we really can't be sidetracked by trying to figure out what these things are. So for a long time, what would happen is that the intelligence officers, they would make note of people seeing these objects, but it wouldn't be the prime subject matter of the intelligence report that would then go up the ladder. So as Keith Chester pointed out, where a lot of crews would report these things, a lot of crews didn't report them because they knew it was not going to go anywhere, and they didn't want to be ridiculed, which would happen a lot if word got out that you saw one of these things. So where Keith, uncovered dozens of episodes in World War II where people saw Foo Fighters, his contention is that there's probably hundreds and hundreds of sightings that just went unreported. So then when the American 8th Air Force came over to England and joined the British into bombing Germany, the Americans would bomb during the day and the British would bomb at night. American crews start seeing these strange things, and it really continued throughout the entire war.
This was not exclusively a European theater phenomenon. There were also cases, including the famous case at Leonard Stringfield. It changed his life. He went into a complete, research program for the rest of his life, trying to, obviously, he was the father of crash saucer research. But there were quite a number of Pacific theater sightings as well. I just wanted to kind of remind everybody of that.
That's right. That's right. And the Stringfield one was interesting because it was right after the war ended, and he was on an airplane flying to Japan with the occupation forces, and he saw three Foo Fighters off the right wing of the aircraft, and at the same time they appeared, the aircraft developed engine trouble and was almost in the process of crashing. And then the Foo Fighters disappeared, the engines came back on, and the plane landed safely. But from that single incident, that changed his life, and he became, a very famous UFO researcher.
This opens up a whole kettle of fish here, ball of wax, whatever cliche you want to use, which people like Joseph Farrell, David Childress, there's a number of researchers that have taken the original intelligence assessment, intelligence agencies' assessment of the Foo Fighter phenomenon, and they have suggested that perhaps some of these furballs, as they were also called by the Germans, were actually some sort of very terrestrial German, exotic technology. Where do you come down on that? How much work did you do in looking into the Brotherhood of the Bell, some of the projects that were going on in Czechoslovakia, Victor Schauberger, the various types of designs that have come forth in the years after World War II that seem to suggest that the Germans did have an interest in circular craft, in exotic propulsion, vortex-type propulsion, in the case of the Schauberger vortex engines. Where do you come down on that? Do you think there's a possibility that some of these objects could have been of terrestrial manufacture and design? Or do you think that these are truly high-strange events that have no other explanation that could be terrestrial, in nature?
I don't believe they were a terrestrial design. I don't buy into that whole German super weapons theory, and I'll tell you why. First of all, German pilots saw these things too, and they found out after the war that they believed that they were Allied secret weapons. The Allies believed that they were German secret weapons. But when the war was over, there was no huge manufacturing, scientific research facility found anywhere in Germany that would have been able to produce these things. Where's the support mechanism for something of having these fantastic weapons? You would have to have, hundreds, thousands of scientists. You'd have to have something on the order of the creation of the A-bomb to make fantastic weapons that could go 4,000 miles an hour at the blink of an eye. There is no recorded instance where any of these Foo Fighters ever fired on Allied aircraft. If they were German superweapons, why aren't they shooting down all of our airplanes? Why aren't they immolating all our troops on the ground? Why are they so passive? Okay.
Exactly. Well, that leads me to another question. In all your research that you did you ever find a single instance where Foo Fighters acted in any sort of hostile manner and perhaps disabled or even brought down any aircraft from any side in the war?
No. There's not one single incident of Foo Fighters showing any kind of aggression. And once again, it comes to this fact. I believe, and I believe strongly, and I don't want to disparage the people who have done a lot of research into this, but in my mind, to say that these were Nazi superweapons and to keep that idea alive is frankly keeping the idea of the Nazis alive. And I think that is not a good thing to do. I think there's a more productive way to spend our time. In 1944, the Germans were so depleted of resources, they were building the cockpits of their Me-262 jet fighters out of wood. Okay, this cannot be the same, military who is somehow in some secret mountain somewhere building aerial machines that can go 4,000 miles an hour.
They don't have a Stargate sitting there at the Yucca Mountain or something. We have Mack Maloney with Gene and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
America's #1 source for independent talk radio for over a decade. We are the GCN Radio Network.
Ray Perkins, a reclusive veteran burned out from the Gulf War, lives tortured by relentless, perplexing nightmares. Nightmares of a horrific battle in deep space and of a mysterious woman suffering in agony for her devastated world. A woman not yet born, calling across centuries to him. Then, a coincidence leads him to his destiny, his chance to alter the universe. Attack of the Rockoids. The former fiction editor for Star Wars and Indiana Jones, Robert Simpson, writes, "The soul of the novel Attack of the Rockoids lies in its heart and passion for building a convincing tale of a love that spans the galaxy. A thrilling story. Attack of the Rockoids is available now. Read a sample chapter and get a special discount off of the cover price at our website, rockoids.com. That's ROCKOIDS.com. Attack of the Rockoids, a novel in the grand science fiction tradition.
Iodine protection packs from hempusa.org are now in stock for immediate delivery worldwide. Our iodine protection packs include microplant powder, green life kelp, red palm oil, and our clear roll-on iodine that will feed the body the iodine it needs. All iodine protection packs are in stock, save you money, and ship for free in all 50 states. Visit hempusa.org or call 908-691-2608 today. HempUSA.org has a revolutionary wonder food for detoxing the body and rebuilding the immune system. Microplant powder can help unclog arteries and soften heart valves while removing heavy metals, virus, fungus, bacteria, and parasites. Plus, it cleans and purifies the blood, lungs, stomach, and colon. Keep your body clean with microplant powder. Visit us at HempUSA.org or call 908-691-2608 today.
Introducing a diabetes breakthrough, an easy, natural, organic way to bring relief to diabetics. Introducing MDS Forte, a concentrated super-strength extract formulated for those who are looking for relief. What can MDS Forte do for you? MDS Forte reduces glucose levels safely and effectively, reduces cholesterol and triglyceride levels, increases HDL or good cholesterol while reducing LDL or bad cholesterol. MDS Forte reduces A1C, improves eyesight and circulation to the limbs, and helps with weight loss. Is non-toxic, caffeine-free, 100% natural, 100% organic, and comes with a 100% money-back guarantee. Waiting for the side effects disclaimers? With MDS Forte, there are none. Order a 25-day treatment of MDS Forte by calling 213-405-5355, 213-405-5355, or visit bestbloodsupport.com. That's bestbloodsupport.com for MDS Forte, a diabetes breakthrough.
Hi, I'm Mark Craighead, founder of Crossbreed Holsters. I designed our top-selling holster, the Super Tuck Deluxe, to solve the problems of being poked, pinched, and gouged while carrying concealed. The Super Tuck Deluxe is the most comfortable, most concealable holster on the market today. We offer a 2-week free trial and a lifetime warranty.
Visit us at crossbreedholsters.com. Don't forget, crossbreedholsters.com.
That's the sound of your door being kicked in by an intruder with a single kick. That's the sound of the same door now protected by the Door Sentinel at mysafedoor.com. Go to mysafedoor.com right now and watch the amazing video. At mysafedoor.com, you'll learn how to turn your home into a fortress with the Door Sentinel. 16 kicks later, and the Door Sentinel is still holding strong. mysafedoor.com. That's mysafedoor.com.
This is Jerome Clark, author of the UFO Encyclopedia and other books. You're listening to the Paracast.
With Gene and Chris, we're talking to Mack Maloney about UFOs in wartime. And once again, you point out here that except for in the days of Alexander, the UFOs were not participants in our wars. They were the observers.
Yes, that's right. That's right. That's the one key thing, the one string that goes through almost everything we have in the book is that they're observing us. They're looking in on us. They're interested in us, especially when we're at war. There are a couple of episodes where kind of deviate from that, but for the most part, and especially during World War II, there was no instance where they showed any kind of aggression at all.
One thing that you mentioned in your book, Mac, and this is, I think, a perfect time to bring this up. What did the Germans and Japanese truly know about Foo Fighters? And you've come up with some very interesting stuff here about this Sonderbüro 13, which was some sort of shadowy investigative unit that the Luftwaffe set up. And they did an assessment of the situation. Some of the reports that they, investigated are quite interesting, including the flying whale, this 300-foot long, 50 feet in diameter object that a German pilot described as having a very close encounter with. Why don't you give us a little sense of what the Germans were up to? Evidently, they seem to be, about, if not more puzzled than the Allies, at least as puzzled by this new aerial phenomenon that was being reported by pilots.
Right, that's true. I mean, there's not as much information on what the German side saw, but we do know that, well, according to Henry Durand, who is a French UFO writer, he's the one who wrote about this, that the Germans set up a section called Sonderbüro 13, as you said, and they looked into German pilots seeing Foo Fighters. And one of them was the story of a pilot. He was being transferred to Norway, and he felt that he was being transferred, out to the boondocks. He wasn't happy about it, but as it turns out, he arrives at this base way up in Norway called Banak. As soon as he gets there, they see a unidentified flying object over the field. They ask him to take off and go look for it. He did. He gets about 10,000 feet above the base, and he sees what he described as a Luftwaffe, meaning flying whale in German. And it was huge, streamlined, 300 feet long, about 50 feet in diameter, flying along horizontally. And he had it under observation for quite a while, and then all of a sudden, like a lot of these things do, blink the eye and the thing is gone in a blazing burst of speed. He landed. He told people what he saw. He told the superiors what he saw, and they were sure what was going on was that he was just reacting to the fact that he'd been transferred to this, outpost out in the middle of nowhere. And, they thought he had gone slightly insane, and the next day they transferred him out of there. There was another story where Heinrich Himmler and Joseph Goebbels, who was the propaganda chief of Nazi Germany, were witnessing a V-2 rocket launch. And they were filming it. And the rocket went up, and as the rocket was going up, everyone there saw this like a spherical body going around the rocket as it was going up into the sky. And Goebbels asked, what is this? And the Germans, scientists on the ground said, we don't know. We think it's some kind of a British secret weapon. There was another case in which a German pilot in an Me-262, which was their jet fighter, encountered a huge cylindrical object. Once again, it's 300 feet long. This thing had an antenna on it, seemed to be intelligently controlled. I'm sure there were many other stories too. Now, the thing about the Sonderberg Bureau is that there's a chance that that itself might not be true. And I'm sure maybe a lot of people have heard this story too. But Henry Grant supposedly, when he wrote his book, The Black Book of Flying Saucers, he says that he invented this just to make sure that UFO writers, who were writing books after his book came out in 1970, that they were checking their facts. Did it
Interesting.
exist?
I never knew that.
Right. Did it exist? Did it not exist? Is this just him laying some kind of a trap for people like me, not doing their research? Who knows? I don't know. But it seems to me that if Allied pilots were seeing Foo Fighters, then German pilots must have been seeing them too, and Japanese pilots must have been seeing them as well.
So what about the Pacific Theater sightings? I've heard of some actually almost terrifying. There have been some close encounter cases, I think, from the Pacific Theater that are as impressive, if not even more so, than some of the European theater stories. Why don't you give us a quick summary of some of that activity? Then we'll go on to the post-war era when we have, again, a northern latitude, a Sweden, Norway, Finland outbreak of a different kind of mysterious ghost rocket, as they called them at the time. But first, let's talk the Pacific and then move on.
Right. Once again, tip of the hat to Keith Chester, because he was the guy who really dug into the archives of the Army Air Force. Back then, in World War II, the Army was the Air Force, and also the U.S. Navy aviation arms. Now, as he pointed out, the Navy where he was able to get into the archives of and see the reports of the Army Air Forces. The Navy never really released a lot of this information, so there might be a treasure trove somewhere still waiting to be uncovered of sightings made by U.S. Navy pilots in the Pacific Theater during World War II of Foo Fighters. But we were able to come across a few of them. The one that really struck me was the case of the USS New York. It was a battleship that was in the Atlantic during most of the war, and then was transferred to the Pacific towards the end of the war because they needed, battleships were just heavily gunned, and they needed it for the landings at Iwo Jima and Okinawa. And it was sailing off in New Guinea when all of a sudden this object, they saw it approaching on radar. It stopped right over the battleship. The battleship was being escorted by 2 destroyers at the time. And this thing just hovered above the battleship. Or I shouldn't really say hovered, because the battleship was going about 14 knots. This thing, a dish-shaped flying saucer-shaped object, paced the battleship for 4 hours. 4 hours. Now, it could not have been a conventional aircraft because there's no airplane that can fly 14 knots. Okay, it can't be a balloon because it stayed right with it for all this time. The crews of the battleship and the 2 destroyers saw it. Everybody saw it. At one point, they started shooting at it, and it had no effect, and it finally flew away. That to me is an amazing story.
They have film footage somewhere in some archive of that.
Right.
They've got to.
They've got to.
Stephen Bassett, take notes.
Right. Yep, for sure. Where is it? I think there's lots and lots of information, written and film information, film stuff that is still to be uncovered about Foo Fighters in World War II.
Okay, well, how about the ghost rockets? Let's move forward. We have this emerging phenomenon. Military intelligence, the air forces of the world are scratching their heads. And then quickly on the heels of this, we have an outbreak of these strange rockets that are flying around. The only rockets up to that point really was the V-1 buzz bomb and the V-2, which was totally taken over by the Soviets and Americans. That project, you had no manufacturer of rockets, and then all of a sudden you have an outbreak of these very amazing sightings. Why don't you give us a quick thumbnail of the whole ghost rocket phenomenon?
Well, the ghost rockets appeared in 1946, once again over Sweden, interestingly enough. And what they were was And people saw them starting in February of 1946 and right through that summer. And what people saw were literally rockets. They were long, thin. Some had wings, some didn't. But you could see, flames, thrust coming out of the back of them. But thousands of people saw these things, and hundreds of them were reported flying over Sweden and heading north into, the hinterlands of Sweden. So many
saw them. There weren't that many events. There were dozens of events, granted, but I don't think really there were hundreds
of them,
separate ghost rocket events, not sighting reports.
Hundreds of events, but we've got so much more to explore. We're talking to Mack Maloney, and this book is called UFOs in Wartime. With Gene and Chris, you're in
the Paracast.
Are you tired of searching for great talk radio?
Something more important.
Search no more. We are the GCN Radio Network.
Graphic Converter is the image manipulation tool for the rest of us. It does not use any database. You get full control of all your files. Want to view the images of a folder? Drag it into Graphic Converter, and a powerful browser opens up to show your image files. You could use it for slideshows. You could use it to import images from digital cameras or from scanners. Need to do some image editing? You can do that too in Graphic Converter. Also print catalogs. Convert from so many formats I can't even list them. Download now to see if Graphic Converter is good for you, like 1.5 million other users. Guess what? You could save money when you buy Graphic Converter. Use the coupon code Night Owl. Use the coupon code Night Owl to get a special price for Graphic Converter. Go to lemkesoft.com. That's LEMKE soft.com. Lemkesoft.com. LEMKE soft.com.
If you constantly feel run down and tired, your pH level might be low, and your body could be full of toxins. If what you drink is not at a pH level of 8 or higher, you are inviting bacteria and acid to thrive in your body. But there is something you can do. Simply add 10 drops of AlkaVision Plasma pH drops to your water to help your body rid itself of acidic waste, increase oxygen, and raise your pH balance to optimum levels. AlkaVision Plasma pH drops combine a unique formula of the most alkaline minerals in the world, alkalizing the water you drink, ridding your body of acidic waste and toxins, and helping you regain energy and vibrant health. And studies show viruses, bacteria, and toxins cannot survive in an alkaline, high pH environment. Order your bottle of AlkaVision Plasma pH drops at alkavision.com. That's ALKA vision.com. Or call 269-409-1776. 269-409-1776. Alkalize your body. Supercharge your health at alkavision.com today.
What looks good under your Christmas tree and tastes even better? Big Berkey water filters. Yes, the gift of clean water. A gift that provides a great foundation for achieving good health in the lives of your loved ones. A Big Berkey water filter gives them protection from bacteria, heavy metals, chlorine, fluoride, pesticides and herbicides, VOCs and more. And best of all, a Big Berkey water filter is a gift that lasts for many years with no additional investment. And that saves time and money in filter replacements that other water filters require and are even powerful enough to purify treated, untreated, or even stagnant pond water. As always, all orders over $50 are shipped free, and GCN listeners get 5% off all ceramic filter systems. Order online at BigBerkeyWaterFilters.com, spelled Big, B-E-R-K-E-Y, waterfilters.com, or call 877-99-BERKEY. That's 877-99-BERKEY. Gift well this Christmas. Give a Big Berkey water filter.
If you owe the IRS money you can't pay, then listen carefully, because you already know that the problem won't go away by itself. You can get help today from the leading tax expert in the country, Dan Pilla.
Hi, I'm Dan Pilla. The IRS isn't going to just forget about you. Right now, the IRS is hiring thousands of tax collectors to go after delinquent accounts just like yours. That's why you need to take action today, and I can help. I take a simple but proven approach to solving your tax debt problem. First, I stabilize collections so you don't have to worry about wage and bank levies. Next, I build a detailed plan to get your debt reduced to the fullest extent possible, sometimes even eliminated. Finally, I work with you every step of the way to get your problem solved once and for all. So call now for a free consultation. Call 1-800-346-6829.
Dan Pilla will solve your tax problem, guaranteed. He's helped thousands of people, and he can help you too. Call us today at 800-346-6829. That's 800-34-NO-TAX.
This is Jerome Clark, author of the UFO Encyclopedia and other books. You're listening to the Paracast.
So the question is, Mack Maloney, hundreds of cases. Chris and Gene waiting for the answer on the Paracast. What say you?
Well, what happened was the Swedish military was so concerned about this that they broke their traditional neutrality, and they secretly went to the British and asked them for some aircraft radar. The British sent them radar. They set up these radar stations in Sweden, and sure enough, the ghost rockets start showing up on radar, and there were just ghost rockets confirmed on radar, 200 examples of individual ghost rockets found on radar, and then you add that to the number of visual sightings. But what happened then was the U.S. got involved, and they actually sent Jimmy Doolittle over to Sweden secretly. He was working for Shell Oil at the time, and his cover story was he was over in Sweden looking at oil refineries, but what he was really doing was consulting with the Swedish military and looking at all the information that they had got about these ghost rockets. And at that time, what they thought was happening was that the Russians had taken over Peenemünde, which was the Nazis' research facility for V-1 and V-2 rockets, and they had theorized that the Russians had just kind of reconstituted that base, and what people were seeing were V-1 rockets. But
that's not what those were.
Right.
Peenemünde was like non-operational.
Yeah, it was a ghost town. You know, it did fall into Russians' hands. It was in what became East Germany, but what happened was it had been bombed heavily. The Germans had destroyed a lot of the equipment as they were retreating, so when the Russians got there, it was basically a ghost town, and anything that was left, they just packed up and shipped deeper into Russia. So they determined pretty quickly that it wasn't Peenemünde. And that's what Doolittle eventually briefed President Truman about. So these 1946, all these people are seeing these rockets, and finally a Swedish military plane found one of them flying, encountered one. And what that pilot reported was, as I said, 15 feet long, small wings in front, small tail section in the back. And even more bizarre was he reported that this thing seemed to be flying as if it had terrain guidance. And what that is, real quick, is that terrain guidance first came into being with the F-111 fighter bomber of the U.S. in the 60s. And what it is if you're flying along low, let's say you dial into your computer 500 feet in altitude, you're going to be flying at 500 feet. If you come to a mountain that's 1,000 feet high, the plane is automatically going to go up and over that mountain and keep that 500-foot buffer between you. So it's terrain following technology, which is very complicated. We weren't able to do it until the 60s, and that was in an airplane. Our cruise missiles today have it, but cruise missiles today really came about in the 80s.
The point being then that the UFOs are once again showing technology just a little bit ahead of ours.
Yeah, that's right. There was an interview made in the 80s of someone who was connected with the Swedish Defense Ministry, and his quote was, from all indications that he had seen, from all the descriptions he had seen, what people were seeing exactly, he described as exactly what we know today as cruise missiles. But as he said, who was flying cruise missiles over Sweden in 1946?
That's the question right there. I love it.
Okay, by the way, we should tell our listeners that, as you know, we ask our listeners in the Paracast forums at forum.theparacast.com to pose questions to our guests. We didn't have a lot of advance warning in getting this set up, so we don't have too many questions. But, Chris, you've assembled a couple.
Yeah, it comes from just after the ghost rocket period. It's a question by W.W. Kirk, who's a fairly long-time member of the forums. And he gives us a quote, Mac. He says, General Benjamin Chidlaw, former commanding general of the Air, later Aerospace Defense Command, reportedly said in 1953, quote, "We have stacks of reports of flying saucers. We take them seriously. When you consider we have lost many men and planes trying to intercept them. Now, are you familiar with this quote? I'm not sure exactly where WW came up with this. It does ring a bell to me. But let's talk about the post-war period and now what, George Filer, there's a number of people out there that claim that this is when the U.S. started to get into an adversarial relationship with these aerial objects. I don't recall seeing much about that. Of course, the Philip Mantell case, which is equivocal, comes to mind. But why don't we talk about that real quick? This whole sort of 50s, fighters trying to intercept these objects. And then, of course, soon on the heels of that, we have the interest in nuclear sites, as we touched on before. So what about this early 50s period? This is a crucial time period from 48, let's say, to 53. What does your research tell you?
Well, the 50s were definitely, you could call the 50s the decade of the UFO because there was just, hundreds, if not thousands, of sightings during the 50s. But we have to go back a little bit to 1947, and that's when, right after Arnold first saw his flying objects and coined the term flying saucers. After that hit the media, people started seeing flying saucers all over the country. We had Roswell, we had the Maury Island incident, and so the Air Force, thought, well, we really do have to look into this. And of course, they're always thinking from a national security point of view, and what they're worried about is, could these things be Russian weapons? Is our security threatened here? So they gave the mission to what was then called the Air Technical Intelligence Center in Dayton, Ohio, to look into, did UFOs exist? They weren't called UFOs at the time, but and so it took 6 months for the ATIC to come to the conclusion. Now, the ATIC was made up of scientists and engineers, and they were really held in high regard in the Air Force. And their conclusion was that the phenomenon is not visionary or fictitious. They believed that flying saucers were real and that the Air Force should study them further. Now, this freaked everybody out, if I can use that term. This isn't what they expected to hear, but because the ATIC was so well regarded, the Air Force said, well, we better look into it. And that really was the beginning of the Project Sign, which is the Air Force.
and Blue Book, yeah.
Right, exactly. It was the beginning of that. And the people at ATIC looked into it, and they once again, they came back 6 months later and said, this is something, they're not hallucinating. People aren't hallucinating when they see this.
Well, our listeners, I think most people actually listening to the show are really up to speed. This is where people, their knowledge really starts to drill in. But really the question is, though, that there have been claims made by, for instance, George Filer, who was in the Air Force during the time period. And there seems to be a suggestion that there was an adversarial, shoot on sight type scenario going on at some point during the 50s. And the claim here, and going back to our question concerning General Chidlaw's comment that we've lost men and planes, this is like a whole new wrinkle in the whole sort of passive watcher observer role of these objects, and we're actually starting, for all appearances, starting to get aggressive with them. What does your research tell you about that aspect, the adversarial relationship that began to flourish allegedly during the 50s?
Well, I think it is allegedly. I didn't come upon anything where there was any kind of warfare between UFOs and U.S. military jets, fighters. There were instances, the Mantell case is one. There are several instances where airplanes were lost, airplanes disappeared while, pursuing UFOs and things of that nature. But there was a shoot-down order, and I'm sure your audience probably knows this too, right after the twin UFO sightings in Washington, D.C. in the early 50s, President Truman gave the order which said to all U.S. fighter pilots that if you encounter a UFO, if you can't, quote-unquote, talk him down, then shoot him down. And, of course, that caused a great stir because when word of that leaked out, people were saying maybe we shouldn't be shooting at these things because they're such fantastic technology.
They're going to send Gort on us.
Right, exactly. But I didn't come upon any of this.
Okay, so you don't think that we actually lost many planes and weapons, as General Chitlaw sort of intimated? I'm not sure where this quote comes from. It does ring a bell. Of course, we also have other evidence as well that suggests that maybe some incidences happen. Obviously, these weren't part of the public record. I was just curious to know how much, if you really dug in that direction, and if you did, what you found. Because
and I have another question, too. I have another kind of significant question here about a couple of these cases. But first, got to tell you, if you have a comment or a question about the show, write us news@theparacast.com, news@theparacast.com. We also have questions and answers in our forums, wide-ranging discussions on everything under the sun at forum.theparacast.com. That's forum.theparacast.com. Mark Maloney with us, UFOs in Wartime's the book with Gene and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
The GCN Radio Network, providing the world with hard-hitting talk radio. GCN. Great talk radio starts here.
Hi, this is Ted Anderson. If you'd like to listen to GCN programs on the go, I have great news. GCN has created a Droid and iPhone application, and it's free. Just as easy as going to GCNlive.com, click on the banner, and download. Before you know it, you'll be listening to your favorite hard-hitting GCN shows, live or on demand, right on your Droid or iPhone, 24/7 and on the go. So download the Droid and iPhone app free by clicking on the banner at GCNlive.com. Thanks again for listening to GCNlive.com. Again, that's GCNlive.com. Hi, this is Ted Anderson. Have you ever wondered why banks, stockbrokers, investment advisors won't talk about gold IRAs? They've been available since 1986, yet the financial industry won't recognize the value of gold for your retirement. Gold has outperformed paper investments, yet no word about IRAs. If you would like to have gold for your retirement, call 800-686-2237. Don't get left behind by rising inflation and low returns. Call 800-686-2237. Secure your future and call 1-800-686-2237.
Welcome back to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
We continue with Mack Maloney on the Paracast with Gene and Chris. The book is called UFOs in Wartime, about cases through the ages that occurred in synchronicity with war. Okay, you mentioned the Maury Island case, and it's a can of worms. A number of people feel that case was a hoax or of conventional design. And then with the Mantell case, some people suggest he was just following the planet Venus. He got fooled, he flew too high, and caused his own death. Any response?
Well, with the Maury Island case, I mean, you're right. It's a can of worms. It seems 50-50 whether it was a hoax or whether it actually happened. It seems to me that something happened there. I mean, just so many things.
Well, losing two Air Force investigators on a plane crash, leaving the site of the investigation.
That's
true. That fact
true.
Alone makes it interesting.
It makes it interesting, right? And there was just so many people involved. If it was some kind of a hoax, it just seems like there would be just too many moving parts to pull off a hoax like that. The FBI didn't believe that it wasn't a hoax. The FBI believed it was real, but then other people said, well, if you look a little deeper, all it is was just some kind of a intelligence operation to discredit people seeing UFOs. So I don't know. To me, it was just interesting subject to put in the book. We devote probably about 10 pages to it. And all these things, I just ask people if you're interested in any episode that appears in the book, just go and look at the research and you really make up your own minds. With the Mantell case, I don't believe that he was chasing Venus because, first of all, he was a pretty experienced pilot. He was the flight leader of 4 F-51s that day, and usually the flight leader was the most experienced guy. Whatever he was chasing, he was mesmerized by it. So much so that he went way beyond the safety limit of, how high he could fly altitude-wise. He was beyond the capabilities of his oxygen supply. His last words were, it's gigantic and I'm getting closer to it. I can't believe that. And plus, it was during the day. I don't know if you can really see Venus during the day to the point that you would actually chase it. I think he saw something else. I think he saw something that he had no idea what it was, and he wanted to find out what it was, and he overstepped his bounds as far as, his flight envelope to find out what it was, and tragically he was killed.
And the other key is here, is there any evidence that any of these wartime cases involve something that indicates a UFO might have fired back?
Nothing during the 50s. No, nothing during the 50s. Now, I will say something as an aside. What that is that completely, off the subject of UFOs, there were airplanes, U.S. airplanes being shot down by the Russians during the 50s. We created a whole fleet of spy planes. A lot of them were C-130 cargo planes that would fly around the borders of Russia, sometimes crossing over the border, with their listening gear pointed towards the middle of Russia to see what the Russians were up to, where they were testing nuclear weapons or whatever, and they would send MiGs up against these planes and shoot down these planes. They were unarmed. So this was an unknown, undeclared war between Russia and the United States, and a lot of pilots and a lot of planes were lost during this, as I say, undeclared war. Whether that somehow got mixed up with chasing UFOs or not, I don't know.
Good point. Very interesting point. Another thing I wanted to mention about the Maury Island in that crucial time period, June, July, in the Puget Sound area of Washington State. My father was aboard a Coast Guard cutter and was serving in the Coast Guard in Puget Sound during that time period. And he told me when I was a kid that they had brand new radar units, and they clocked objects that appeared to be traveling in excess of 10,000 miles an hour, 10K. And some of these sightings, there was, I can't remember his exact wording, but something about them coming in and out of Puget Sound, not only flying around, but actually entering the water as well. I just wanted to mention that as an aside. Now, obviously, we have Roswell right after that, and we don't even want to go into that can of worms. We don't have enough time because we've got a lot of interesting material in your book to cover here.
And we've also covered Roswell to death.
I don't believe Roswell happened, and I say that in the book. I just don't think it happened.
You know what? Let's hear about this. Why do you feel that Roswell never happened?
Okay, here's a can of worms, folks.
Okay, well, once again, you kind of have to look at numbers, okay? And the numbers would be that, first we have the story about, the crash debris is found. And then if you see the crash debris in the photographs that were taken, I mean, a good case can be made that it was, part of this kite, this spy balloon that the Air Force was.
A balloon train.
Yeah, right. And sure, was there a cover-up? Yes, there was a cover-up. But it wasn't a cover-up because of UFO crash. It was a cover-up because they wanted to keep this spy balloon program under wraps. And then it seemed to have taken a life of its own. When I was young and I would read UFO books, there was no mention of Roswell in any of these books, but it just kind of came back to life in the late 70s or early 80s.
Like
and then all of a
Frankenstein's
sudden,
monster.
Right, and now there's 5 UFOs were found, and alien bodies everywhere, and so on and so forth.
Multiple crash sites.
Yeah, you cannot, there's just...
And they were brought down by radar, Mac. Don't forget that. They were brought down by radar.
There's just too many moving parts for this to be real. Once again, I don't want to disparage the people who have spent a lot of time researching this.
Right.
But just in the stuff that I read, I just don't. I don't think it happened.
Okay, there you go, Gene.
Okay, well now we're going to see those letters in our forum saying, "What's he talking about?" I know a few people who have obviously explored very extensively Roswell, have been on the show. Also, the Aztec case. I assume the Aztec case in Aztec, New Mexico, you don't think that happened either?
Yeah, I didn't look very deeply into that, but I probably shouldn't comment about that. How's that?
All right.
Gene, you're bad. You're a bad man. Mac is, he's done a really good job. Mac, I've looked through the book extensively, and you did it. This is a really good resource for someone that's interested in, a more objective way of looking at the history of the UFO phenomenon. And you're right, there does seem to be a correlation with hostilities amongst humans. If you pattern and look at the waves of activity, they tend to occur right around the points where we're getting ready to go to war, and then they ebb and flow a little bit through that period. But then there's a real increase as soon as we're done with conflict. And if you do a correlation between the waves of UFO sightings and when we're moving massive amounts of armed men around the planet, you find an interesting correlation. That's something that I wanted to point out before we move forward. We did talk briefly about the Vietnam War. There are a lot of interesting reports that you hear about, but you don't see good documentation of concerning Vietnam. What about Vietnam? Korea is a whole nother thing that I don't think enough people have really looked into the amount of potential sightings during the Korean War. Are there any?
Yes, there were. I mean, the Korean War was actually pivotal in this, and Richard Haynes is the guy who really brought this to light. You know, the Air Force had closed down all their UFO investigative units by the time right before the Korean War started, and they just wanted to basically be out of the business of investigating UFOs. And the famous quote by one general said, after the ATIC revised its findings and said that, you know, there really wasn't anything to UFOs. The famous quote is, some general said, behind nearly every UFO report stands a crackpot, a religious crank, a publicity hound, or a malicious joke. Okay, and that was the Air Force's stated opinion on it, and they wanted to be their last opinion on it, their last statement on it. But now, 6 months after that statement came out, Korea starts, and all of a sudden, what you have is lots of jet fighters flying over Korea. Korea is only about one-third the size of Texas. You have, not only do you have a lot of radar on the ground and on ships, but now you have radar on airplanes themselves and high-speed aircraft. So you have many human eyes seeing these things, but also electronic eyes. And there were a number of instances in the book where military pilots came upon huge UFOs over Korea in the midst of battle. There were also several more instances where UFOs would circle over the fleet, and people would think that there were MiGs, setting up an attack, and yet these things would circle over aircraft carriers for 8, 9, 10 hours at a time. They would send planes up to get them, but they were always just a little bit beyond the visual range, always hiding in the clouds, on radar, but they were never seen. And what happened was, and Richard Haynes told me this, and I agree with him.
We'll have to explain what happened and what Richard Haynes told you in our next segment with Mack Maloney, UFOs and Wartime's the book with Gene and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
Are you ready to order the official Paracast t-shirt? You asked, we answered. We're now taking orders for the official Paracast t-shirt. It comes in white, 100% cotton. The front of it features the same logo that we have on our community forums. On the back it says, separating signal from noise. To order the official Paracast t-shirt, here's all you have to do. Visit our new online store at store.theparacast.com. One more time, that's store.theparacast.com. You can use a major credit card to place your order for the official Paracast t-shirt. Hey neighbors, we have one more thing to talk about, and that's more merchandise at the official Paracast store. We have hats, we have jackets, we even have a flip video camcorder customized with the Paracast logo at the official Paracast store. It's all now available at the official Paracast store, store.theparacast.com.
Making the right decisions is a challenge to investors. Are we going to see economic growth, slide into a recession, or at worst, depression? Hi, Ted Anderson from Midas Resources. We all know when a company acts irresponsibly, divesting ourselves in a move towards safety is prudent. When the market becomes volatile, U.S. Treasuries are a safe haven. But what do you do when the U.S. government overextends itself and spends beyond its means? Many investors are turning toward gold as a common-sense alternative to traditional paper investments. Midas Resources has put together a powerful book titled 10 Reasons to Own Gold, discussing costs, benefits, risks, featuring full-color illustrations, weights, and measures. The book is free and can be yours by calling 800-686-2237. Paper investments are dwarfed by gold's 6,000-year history. Discover how gold may be right for you and your IRA by calling 800-686-2237. Whether buying or it's time for you to sell, the book is free. Call 800-686-2237.
Solar power. Solar power. Hand crank power. Hand crank power. Radio power. Radio power. The goods you want, the good deals you need to power up your survival are at 21stcenturygoods.com. In our solar department, you'll find solar generator kits, solar lanterns, flashlights, radios, and solar cell phone and laptop chargers. 21stcenturygoods.com is your hand crank headquarters for everything from generators to flashlights to emergency, weather, and shortwave radios by Grundig and Cato. Big brand names and big deals. Like this. Get a free solar flashlight with every order over $75. But hurry, offer ends soon. Go to 21stcenturygoods.com. Spelled the number 2, the number 1, ST, centurygoods.com. That's 21stcenturygoods.com or call 866-999-8422. 21stcenturygoods.com. Power up your survival.
We all know that Berkey Water Purification Systems are the most trusted name in water filtration. As an authorized Berkey dealer for over 6 years and serving thousands of satisfied customers, the Berkey Guy offers amazing specials for Berkey water filtration systems. The Berkey Light systems include a set of self-sterilizing and recleanable black purification elements that purify water by removing chlorine, pathogenic bacteria, cysts, and parasites to non-detectable levels and remove harmful chemicals such as herbicides and pesticides. Order the Berkey Light system today, complete with 2 black Berkey elements for only $231, and the Berkey Guy will ship your order free of charge. With the purchase of a Berkey Light, the Berkey Guy is also offering a set of fluoride and arsenic filters for only $39.99. That's over 30% off the retail price. Call the Berkey Guy at 1-877-886-3653. That's 1-877-886-3653. Or order online at goberkey.com. That's goberkey.com today.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And if you'd like to catch up on past episodes, we have hundreds of shows for you to download direct from theparacast.com. That's theparacast.com. Or check us out at iTunes.
As we move down the UFO highway here, UFOs in Wartime, Mack Maloney, you were about to quote something from our friend Richard Haynes, please.
What he told me was, and I agree with him, is that he believes that there were so many UFO incidents in Korea that's what really compelled the Air Force to reopen the investigation and to start Blue Book. You know, the Air Force refused to give any comment at all about UFO sightings in Korea. They would make up excuses for what pilots saw to fit the idea that, well, you know, if something is flying alongside a B-29 for 10 minutes, pacing it, well, we're going to have to call that a communist flare. If the Navy fighter saw a huge object flying at 800 miles an hour, we're going to have to call that an enemy balloon. They would make up these ludicrous, excuses for what their pilots were seeing because they couldn't say their pilots were cranks or crackpots. But he thinks, and I agree with them, that behind the scenes they said we better reopen this, and that's how Blue Book came about. So Korea is really a pivotal point in this whole UFO story.
Any more questions, by the way, Chris?
Except for Vietnam.
Which we'll get to later.
We'll get to later, yeah. Here, let me just ask about the Roosevelt, because this would be a good place, Mac, to start talking about the FDR.
All right, so we're moving from World War II into the 50s and later on. What other conflicts do we find large portions of UFO sightings in? Vietnam, of course.
Vietnam, and, the interesting thing about the 50s is that was the era of the Cold War. And as you were saying earlier, it's not just that a lot of UFO sightings take place during war, but it seems like they are watching us as we're preparing for war. And a case could be made that the entire Cold War and the entire 50s was made up of us preparing to go to war with Russia. The story about the FDR, the USS Franklin Delano Roosevelt, is interesting. The aircraft carrier, it was an aircraft carrier. It was commissioned right after World War II ended. It was one of the first aircraft carriers to have jet aircraft land on it. It was also one of the first Navy aircraft carriers to have nuclear weapons on. And for some reason, over the next 20 years or so, UFOs, there's really the only good word to describe it is they haunted the FDR. There were at least 6 different cases where UFOs showed up over the FDR. The first one was they were doing NATO exercises in the North Sea in 1952. Someone happened to be a photojournalist on the FDR at the time. He took a picture of a UFO going overhead. There were hundreds of ships taking part in this NATO exercise, and hundreds of crewmen on these ships from various countries saw UFOs. UFOs were seen over England air bases, British air bases at the time, Danish air bases at the time, Swedish air bases at the time, and for some reason they all seemed to be keying in on the FDR. So then you flash forward a few years. The FDR had been refitted in Washington, was going to its new home base in Florida, and it went around the bottom of South America, stopped in Rio de Janeiro for a goodwill visit. It's anchored there. 2 UFOs show up. Lots of people on the aircraft carrier saw them. Very vivid, very described as being bright, circular, saucer shaped. Could see portholes in them, and then they disappeared. A few years later, the FDR was in Guantanamo Bay, the famous Gitmo. It was anchored there. UFO showed up, hung over the aircraft carrier for 10 minutes. People could see not only portholes, but they could see people looking out of the portholes at them. And then the UFO took off. The next day, the CIA came aboard the FDR and talked to everyone who had seen the UFO, and their excuse was they claimed they were on the aircraft carrier investigating illegal gambling. If you could imagine the CIA trying to investigate illegal gambling on a Navy ship, but that was just their excuse. They talked to crew members that saw it and then told everyone, don't ever talk about this again. Flash forward to the early 60s. The FDR is now in the Mediterranean. A UFO was seen, picked up on radar, heading right to it at high speed. They launch a couple F-4 Phantom fighters, which were like the new airplane at the time. They get to the intercept point. The UFO disappears. The fighters land back on the ship. Next thing you know, the UFO is right over the FDR, and it stays there for a long time until it finally disappears. The captain of the ship told everyone who saw it and everyone who saw it on radar and with their own eyes, just don't say anything about this again. The FDR then was decommissioned later on, and when UFO investigators went back into their records, they found that any mention of UFOs were wiped clean. It's really an interesting case that you would have one ship that UFOs kind of keyed in on, and the only explanation is because it was the first Navy aircraft carrier to carry nuclear weapons.
It shows again the obsession with UFOs on our nuclear testing. Chris?
Yeah, good job researching that one. Then let's move into the late 50s. The Gander incident, very, very intriguing case. You do a good job of giving a nice little summary of that case. Why don't we talk about that particular encounter?
Again, that's an amazing case. What we have is a super constellation, military version of a super constellation airliner being flown by the Navy. They're flying back from Europe with crews that have done their hitch, and now they're coming back to the U.S. They're flying along. They're about an hour outside of Newfoundland when the crew sees lights below them. And the first thing they think of is that we're off course, we're actually over land, and we're looking down on a town or a village. But then they check their position and they realize, no, they're still over the ocean. So as it turns out, there were a number of air crews on the airplane making the flight. So they brought all these pilots up into the cockpit, and they're all looking down on these lights. Suddenly, a ring of lights comes up at them, and they realize this is an object that is speeding up at them at incredible speed. There's almost a collision. The pilot just barely is able to maneuver out of the way of this thing, and the next thing you know, there's this gigantic object flying off their left wing. Everybody saw it. It stayed there for a little while, and then it took off at high speed. So everyone on the airplane is shaken. They finally landed at Gander. There's Air Force intelligence people there to debrief them. They take everyone's statement, and once again they tell everyone, don't say anything about this. The plane itself finally completes its flight, and it gets down to Pax River in Maryland. And the pilot later on is where Navy intelligence people talk to them. Later on, the pilot was contacted by a U.S. government scientist who said, can I speak to you? And the Navy gave him permission to speak to the scientist. And the scientist basically wanted to know, what happened, and the pilot told him. And then at the end of this interview, the scientist pulls out a portfolio of photographs, and they're all photographs of different kinds of UFOs. And he says, tell me what shape you saw. And in this portfolio, there was one photograph of exactly what the people on that airplane saw. And he said, that's it. That's what we saw. And then he demanded the scientist tell him, where did you get these photographs? And the scientist would not answer him, packed up the portfolio and left. And the pilot was, he's a very experienced Navy pilot, and he was left with this impression, the government must know something about this because I just saw a whole pack of photographs that are in their possession. Let's
remind our listeners, Mac, this event occurred in very early, I think February of '56, if I remember. Mm-hmm. And so you're talking about an interesting time period in the mid to late 50s where the UFO phenomenon kind of took on a different sort of veneer.
Speaking of veneers, and speaking of the Vietnam War, which is what we're going to get into next in terms of UFO sightings, You're listening to a discussion of the book UFOs in Wartime by Mack Maloney with Gene and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
America's #1 source for independent talk radio for over a decade. We are the GCN Radio Network.
Graphic Converter is the image manipulation tool for the rest of us. It does not use any database. You get full control of all your files. Want to view the images of a folder? Drag it into Graphic Converter, and a powerful browser opens up to show your image files. You could use it for slideshows. You could use it to import images from digital cameras or from scanners. Need to do some image editing? You can do that too in Graphic Converter. Also print catalogs. Convert from so many formats I can't even list them. Download now to see if Graphic Converter is good for you, like 1.5 million other users. Guess what? You could save money when you buy Graphic Converter. Use the coupon code Night Owl. Use the coupon code Night Owl to get a special price for Graphic Converter. Go to lemkesoft.com. That's LEMKEsoft.com. Lemkesoft.com. LEMKEsoft.com.
Hi, I'm Mark Craighead, founder of Crossbreed Holsters. I designed our top-selling holster, the Super Tuck Deluxe, to solve the problems of being poked, pinched, and gouged while carrying concealed. The Super Tuck Deluxe is the most comfortable, most concealable holster on the market today. We offer a 2-week free trial and a lifetime warranty.
Visit us at crossbreedholsters.com. Don't forget, crossbreedholsters.com.
That's the sound of your door being kicked in by an intruder with a single kick. That's the sound of the same door now protected by the Door Sentinel at mysafedoor.com. Go to mysafedoor.com right now and watch the amazing video. At mysafedoor.com, you'll learn how to turn your home into a fortress with the Door Sentinel. 16 kicks later, and the Door Sentinel is still holding strong. mysafedoor.com. That's mysafedoor.com.
Storable foods, check. Water filters, check. Gold and silver, check. Tactical gear, check. What's missing from your survival checklist? An essential that should not be taken for granted. Storable vitamins and nutritional supplements. Since many foods do not contain the essential micronutrients your body needs, you need Survival RX, the world's first ultra-long-term storable vitamins and nutritional supplements. How long? Survival RX products have a shelf life of up to 30 years, thanks to triple nitrogen flushing for guaranteed freshness. Go to survivalrx.com for our complete product list, including powdered milk and whey protein isolate. And remember, November is Nuclear Disaster Preparedness Month at survivalrx.com. With every order until November 30th, you will receive a free bottle of potassium iodate. Just enter coupon code RADIO. Go to survivalrx.com. That's survival, the letter R, the letter X.com. Add survivalrx.com to your preparedness checklist today.
Hey everybody, Alex Jones here. If you're looking for the perfect Christmas gift, listen up. This will make your holiday shopping very easy. This year, give a seed bank from one of our oldest sponsors, Solutions from Science, to your friends and family. Here's why. The Survival Seed Bank will give any friend or loved one the ability to grow a full acre crisis garden of nutritionally dense, life-sustaining food. And the Survival Seed Bank is not just a box of open-pollinated seeds. It's an indestructible, waterproof seed bank that can even be buried if we face a real meltdown. And here's the best part. All the seeds in the Survival Seed Bank go through strict germination testing, so you can be confident you're not buying old seeds. Give a Survival Seed Bank this Christmas by going to survivalseedbank.com. That's survivalseedbank.com. Or you can call 877-327-0365 to give the gift that produces an ongoing supply of life-sustaining food.
This is Hilly Rose, and I hope that you do listen to the Paracast because you will learn a great deal about the paranormal.
A couple of more segments to spend with Mack Maloney. The book is called UFOs in Wartime. And we're covering the wars. We only have a short amount of time left. Let's go to the Vietnam War. A couple of highlights, please.
Yeah, we have a question, Gene, from Ward, and he said, I heard a long time ago that in Vietnam, the Viet Cong never had any helicopters. So when the term enemy helicopters was used during that time period, it was really a code word for UFOs. Have you, Mac, have you ever heard anything about that?
Yes, he's right. The North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong never flew helicopters during the Vietnam War, or at least they didn't fly any helicopters below the DMZ, which was the demarcation line between North Vietnam and South Vietnam. So what would happen is, just like back in the World War II, where unidentified aerial objects were seen and they were just called misguided rockets and things of that nature. In Vietnam, the code word was enemy helicopters. But as he says, there were no enemy helicopters. And probably the best episode that we can talk about having to do with this is the Hobart incident. I'm not sure how many people know about this, but basically what happened was in the summer of 1968, there were a lot of U.S. troops right up on the DMZ, looking across the DMZ virtually into North Vietnam, and they started seeing strange lights in the sky. The code word was instituted again, enemy helicopters, but of course the U.S. military knew they weren't enemy helicopters, so they rushed a lot of anti-aircraft missiles, radar, and jets up to the northern part of South Vietnam during this time period. And what happened was the next night, or a few nights later, these strange lights were seen again, and they scrambled F-4 Phantoms and went up to chase these lights. And at the same time, because of this kind of high tension at the time, the U.S. military had asked for all available warships to patrol right off the coast of the DMZ, and that included some of our allies, and that included this Australian destroyer called the HMAS Hobart. So now what we have is F-4 Phantoms flying around at night chasing these strange lights that no one knows what they are. The strange lights fly over the DMZ and then go out over the Gulf of Tonkin. And at some point during that time period, the F-4 Phantoms shot at these lights. The tragic thing was that what happened was the air-to-air missiles didn't hit the lights, they hit the Hobart, and they killed 3 Australian soldiers. The Hobart started firing back at the F-4s, and no one knew what was going on really until the next morning, and then they realized that in shooting at the strange lights, the enemy helicopters, the Air Force Phantoms had actually unknowingly attacked this Australian destroyer and killed 3 sailors, and wounded a lot of them. And the U.S. military took a lot of the wounded off of the destroyer, brought them to Vietnam, and treated them. And the destroyer was a mess. It had been hit by at least 3 air-to-air rockets, and it had to retire and it went back to Australia to be refitted. Years later, it was actually sunk to be an artificial reef, but really kind of a tragic story. And it all had to do with one night, U.S. fighters chasing UFOs over the DMZ.
Military intelligence, Mac. It's an oxymoron.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, do you think that there's something to that case? Do you think possibly the telemetry or the targeting data or routines with the air-to-air rockets were somehow manipulated by these objects to attack the Hobart?
Well, you make a good point, because it's very hard for a air-to-air rocket. They were Sidewinder missiles, and it would be very hard for them to hit a ship. Frankly, you're flying at least a couple miles in altitude. You're firing it at a specific target, and after a while, the Sidewinder, if it doesn't find its target, it runs out of fuel.
Chances are it's going to find you before it finds a ship all the way down on the deck,
Right.
I just bring that up because there is a curious element there. And, of course, the Gulf of Tonkin brings up another very curious, almost paranormal event that got us into the Vietnam War, which I don't want to digress. We don't have enough time. But it seems that there are UFOs show up at crucial times within the process. And this may have been a shot across our bow in terms of, hey, you try to attack us, look what can happen to you. Well, I'm just putting that out there. So where do we go from here? I mean, we have a couple of more interesting time for a couple of more interesting Vietnam accounts. How about the Viet Cong actually having, the North Vietnamese having their problems with UFOs?
Right. There was a story about a Marine patrol went into there was a notorious place in Vietnam called the Ai Drang Valley, which saw a lot of fighting during the Vietnam War. I'm sorry, the A Shau Valley.
They did a whole Mel Gibson movie, We Were Soldiers, about the first battle there.
So what the Marines used to do is that they would go into this area and they would set up ambush spots where they knew the North Vietnamese were going to come down a certain trail or whatever, and they would try to ambush them. So on this particular night, they were in their ambush mode, and no North Vietnamese showed up. So morning came, and now the Marines are going to go back to their base. They're going back to their base, and they come to a clearing, and all of a sudden they see a UFO overhead. Standard flying saucer, very bright. There it is, right above the jungle canopy. The Marines are kind of mesmerized by it, and all of a sudden they hear gunfire, and it turns out that there were North Vietnamese or Viet Cong soldiers nearby, and they started firing at this thing, and so the Marines basically witnessed this gun battle between communist troops and UFO, and this included, they were firing machine guns at it, rocket-propelled grenades, the works. And eventually, either the Vietnamese, the communists ran out of ammunition or whatever, but the UFO accelerated and took off. The Marines, hightailed it back to their base. They were debriefed. Of course, their superiors said, don't ever mention the incident to anybody.
That's good research. I'd never heard that one. Good job on that one. What about this really cool incident where we have that curious effect of a UFO, killing electrical processes and stopping machinery, that sort of thing? There's a really good case, I think, from '66 that you mentioned about a UFO showing up and shutting everything down. Why don't you tell us about that one real quick?
Right. What it was in 1966, as you say, there's a huge base at Nha Trang, which was about the Midlands of South Vietnam, right on the coast. And one night, a lot of the soldiers there had gathered to watch a movie. They had just got an outdoor generator, and now they had electricity to run a movie projector. So there was several thousand GIs there watching a movie. In another part of the base, there were A-1 Skyraider attack planes getting ready to take off. And another part of the base, there were bulldozers who were bulldozing a new road. And in the middle of the night, actually halfway through this movie, this light appeared above the base, and people thought it was flares because at night there would be a lot of flare activity between the U.S. and communist forces. But this light was so bright and came right down on top of the base, and people didn't know what was going on. And as this happened, all the electricity in the base just stopped. The movie projector stopped. The airplanes couldn't take off. The bulldozers were stalled. The light hung there for quite a while, and then it disappeared. It's probably the one UFO instance in Vietnam that had the largest number of witnesses.
We know it's extremely difficult to make a buck these days, so we're offering a special opportunity for you to work part-time or full-time for the Paracast, the Tech Night Owl Live, and our famous technology commentary site, technightowl.com. If you have a background in online sales and marketing, and if you're ready to make great things happen with our company, please email your resume and your references. Write to us, news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. Maybe you can become a member of our team. I'll tell you what, there's a lot more to come in our final segment with Mack Maloney. With Gene and Chris, you're in
The Paracast.
Are you tired of searching for great talk radio?
Something more important.
Search no more. We are the GCN Radio Network.
You expect professional service from your doctor, your accountant, and even the girl who takes your morning coffee order. Why not from your domain registrar, too? Namecheap.com provides stellar service with no sneaky upselling. We offer more features and security options for your website than there are ways to order a latte. And new domains come with a WhoIsGuard to protect your personal info. At Namecheap.com, you can get your domain for as low as $2.99. Now is a great time to get to know Namecheap.com.
For 58 years, Fate has provided true reports of the strange and unknown. Fate brings you the latest in all aspects of the paranormal, like angels and miracles, psychic phenomena, ghosts, UFOs, and much, much more. To receive your complimentary Fate magazine, call now at 1-800-728-2730 or visit their website at www.fatemag.com. That's 1-800-728-2730. What are you waiting for? Your fate awaits.
Hey folks, this is Crazy Melvin for eFoods Direct, and I'm slashing prices to get you the best deals on your food supply. Call now and save on a 25-year food supply that can save your life when disaster strikes, because it will strike and it will smack you right upside the head, so keep...
Wait a minute, Melvin. I know eFoods Direct, and they're not full of hype like you. eFoods Direct goes to great lengths to ensure you get the best ingredients, full of nutrition and flavor. They are the real deal. Melvin, you're right about one thing, though. For Black Friday weekend, eFoods will save you 30% off anything on their website at efoodsdirect.com/Alex. Now, that's a deal with no hype. Call 800-409-5633 or go to efoodsdirect.com/Alex and save 30% off your entire order. This deal only lasts through Monday, November 28th, so call now. Call 800-409-5633 or go to efoodsdirect.com/Alex. Remember, 30% off this Black Friday weekend. Leave the hype to Crazy Melvin, because you can bet your life on eFoods Direct.
What nutrition are you missing that's leading to the 4 major diseases? Cancer, arthritis, heart disease, and Parkinson's. There are at least 80,000 medical studies that show a lack of the protein glutathione to be linked to cancer, heart disease, Parkinson's, macular degeneration, lung disease, digestive diseases, diabetes, Alzheimer's, ALS, rheumatoid arthritis, and lupus. In all, at least 68 diseases. What is the number one food by which your body is most empowered to increase its glutathione production? It is undamaged whey protein from grass-fed cows. One World Whey is truly the first undamaged whey protein. All other whey protein powders are damaged by heat, chemicals, and filtration. One World Whey is the most life-giving whey protein powder ever produced. Call 888-988-3325. That's 888-988-3325. Or visit oneworldwhey.com. That's oneworldwhey.com.
If you owe money to the IRS, you can't make the problem go away by yourself. But with the help of Dan Pilla, you can get your problem solved once and for all.
Hi, I'm Dan Pilla. For 30 years, I've helped thousands of people solve their tax debt problem, and I can help you solve yours too. We take a very simple but proven 3-step approach to solving your problem. First, we stabilize IRS collection actions so you don't have to worry about the IRS seizing your bank account or paycheck. Next, we build a comprehensive plan to get your tax debt reduced to the fullest extent possible, sometimes even completely eliminated. And finally, we work with you every step of the way to get your problem solved once and for all. Call us for a free consultation. Call 1-800-346-6829. We'll work together to get your problem solved, guaranteed.
Dan Pilla has been protecting taxpayers from the IRS for 3 decades, and he can help you too. Call us today at 800-346-6829. That's 800-34-NO-TAX.
Hi, my name is Richard Dolan. You're listening to the Paracast.
So, we're running out of wars? No, we have the first Gulf War. And the book is UFOs in Wartime by Mack Maloney with Gene and Chris in the Paracast. And there's something here which hits my eye about something called the Stargate. Of course, fodder for a motion picture, a series of TV shows. Mac, what are we talking about? What about the Stargate and Saddam Hussein?
Well, this is an interesting story that I came upon, and it really ends the book. What happened was, it's actually 2 incidents. I kept coming upon stories that during the first Gulf War, so in 1991, that U.S. fighters shot down a UFO. And the story is basically 4 F-16s were on their way to Baghdad on a bombing mission. They spotted UFO. One flew off in pursuit of it. The UFO fired at it. It fired at the UFO, shot the UFO down. The UFO crashed in the Saudi Arabian desert. People saw the wreckage. People also saw the U.S. Army packing it up and allegedly shipping it back to the U.S. Later on, between the first Gulf War and let's call the second Gulf War, there was this war of attrition where the U.S. was bombing Saddam Hussein's aircraft, anti-aircraft batteries. There was a no-fly zone over all of Iraq. And during this time, there was another story that said that Iraqi forces shot down a UFO during this time period, and that they took the remains of the UFO and maybe the crew back to what was basically Iraq's Saddam Hussein's Area 51, and that he had scientists reverse engineer things that they found in this UFO. Now, the odd thing is that there are some people who think that that was the WMD that we were looking for in the Second War. We didn't find any nuclear weapons. We didn't find any evidence of his chemical weapons, and there's a lot of evidence to say that those two programs he had closed down a long time before. So people say, well, why start this war? What's the WMD?
Yeah, what do you think about that, Gene?
I don't know. They never discovered the WMD, and we're kind of living in that belief. So I don't know. Is this it? That's a good question.
I don't know either. I mean, you go to war over something like that. But let's face it, they said they were looking for WMD. I mean, there was no nuclear or chemical WMD found. So what were they looking for?
Exactly. And that also brings up the other wrinkle in this particular story that I've followed over the years. Of course, you know, a lot of this stuff's on the internet. It's very difficult to really track down original sources, that sort of thing. But there were also rumors in the more fantastic version of the story that Saddam Hussein had discovered some sort of ancient Stargate there, and that was also part of the whole scenario of going into Iraq. What has your research uncovered on that?
Well, I didn't really come upon a lot of information on that, but I will say this, is as we all know, where Iraq is today is really the cradle of civilization. The first city was in Iraq. It was called Ur. Well, I haven't done very much research on that, but I think as we all know that where Iraq is today is considered the cradle of civilization. That's where civilization more or less started. So if there was going to be a Stargate somewhere, it probably would be there.
Okay, then when we talk about Stargate, do we think of what we see in the movies, which is some kind of transport device to take you elsewhere?
It would be nice to think of it that way. I think it would be great. If we were to come upon some kind of technology like that, whether it's something left over from thousands of years ago or something that someone could invent now, think of the possibilities of something like that. Think of how the human race would change.
So do you think it's possible that the Iraqis may have actually stumbled on something akin to some kind of ancient technology, but maybe didn't have the time to develop the capabilities? And do you think that would be a good pretext to go to war? Of course, a third of the world's oil is also pretty hefty motivation, but do you think there's anything to that? I have found some interesting equivocal information about this whole idea, this whole concept. But where do you come down on ancient technology possibly existing and even potentially surviving to the modern age that has, high exalted capabilities? Where do you come down on that?
I think it's possible. I think that there was some kind of a civilization on this earth millions and millions of years ago, and we just can't find it. The evidence of it has been wiped clean, or maybe there wasn't as many people involved in it as there are a number of people on Earth now. But I think that there's a possibility that something like that is true, because there is fleeting glimpses of evidence of things like that. And like I say, if it's going to show up anywhere, it's going to show up in Mesopotamia, because that's where the cradle of civilization was. That's where we all came from, as modern human beings. So I have my fingers crossed that someday someone will find something like that, because I think a whole new era of human civilization would begin.
Well, we're getting very close. Okay, so was that the only, as they say, outside possibility for the Gulf War and UFOs? Anything else to mention before we close it out?
There were a couple incidents where right before the first Gulf War, as they were getting ready to go to war, there was a number of episodes that we bring out in the book where people were seeing very strange things flying over the area, over the entire Middle East. There were reports that U.S. Navy ships fired on a UFO right before the war started. Once again, it just goes right to the point where it just seems that when we're about to go to war, or we are at war, the number of UFO sightings spikes. And I think that's interesting. I'd like to know why. But that's the whole premise of the book. And I think that we present a lot of evidence to at least get people thinking what is going on here.
Where do you take it from here? Are you going to write a sequel? Or do you think this is the best effort you could put forth in terms of your entry into UFO investigations?
Yeah, I think this is going to be it, to tell you the truth. I could change, that could change tomorrow. But, we put a lot of time into it. We did a lot of research. And as I say in the book, we scraped the surface. But the thing is that for people to read the book, I urge them to, if there's a particular episode that really sparks your interest, go and look at the research of people like these.
Yeah, help out. Be part of the solution.
Right, exactly. And another thing, too, I should say is that, once again, I'm a writer. I'm more of a reporter. I'm not a UFO researcher. And my hat's off to people like you and the people that I talk to, because you're the people who are keeping this thing going. And someday it will be solved. Someday the puzzle will be solved. And you people will be the heroes.
Data will overwhelm the mystery.
Well, you have kept this going. I mean, there were people years ago who said the world was flat, and then there were people who said, no, it's round. And the people who said it was round were right. But they just stuck to it. And that's why I really admire people who do this on a daily basis. My hat is really off to you people.
Well, thank you. And thanks for Gene, too, because I'll tell you, talk about a guy that's been in the trenches for a long time in this whole thing, right, Mr. Dinosaur?
I am a dinosaur. I resemble that remark. I've been doing it for 81 million years.
There you go.
I remember a place called Terra Nova. And I chased those dinosaurs. And people said, no, you're a dinosaur. And I said, I'm not that big. I don't have 4 arms. I'm not one of those creatures that bites your neck, but I could be a vampire. You never know. Mack Maloney, tell our listeners where they could get more information about what you do, not just this book, but your others.
Well, they can go to mackmaloney.com. It has a list of all the books I've done and just other stuff that we've done. We're working on a site now, UFOs and Wartime.com, that people will be able to go to. We're going to have a lot of information there. The book comes out December 6th. It'll be in all bookstores everywhere December 6th, but you can pre-order it on Amazon.com, and it's going to be, in paper, but also, of course, in digital form.
If it's on digital form, you can't be part of the future. Speaking of part of the future, what have you got going on, Chris O'Brien?
Well, I'm headed off to Tennessee for a conference. Then about a month later, I'm going to be off out in the Southern California area doing a speaking tour there. And, of course, you can always catch me at forum.theparacast.com. I also have a website, Gene, called Our Strange Planet, my eternal work in progress.
So, neighbors, if you have a comment or a question about the Paracast, you know where to send it. news@theparacast.com. Once again, that's news@theparacast.com. We promise to read each and every message, Chris and I, and we'll try to answer most of them. And by the way, if you do want to join our team, you have a background in sales, especially online sales, and broadcast experience as a salesperson is a must, do write us. news@theparacast.com. Once again, that's news@theparacast.com. Special thank you this week to Mack Maloney. Mack, thanks for joining us this week on the Paracast.
Thanks, guys.
The Paracast, featuring Gene Steinberg and Christopher O'Brien, is a copyrighted presentation of Making the Impossible, Incorporated. Tune in next week for a new adventure in The Paracast.